welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio with Tom, Ramon, Jake, and Greg tonight. Or what was that? LFE. LFE. And we have got a great show for you guys lined up. I'm going to cut the intro down quite short. You guys are all quite familiar with this guy. First of all, before I get into that, Ramon, do you have anything you need to touch on tonight? Any new stuff you wanted to throw out there?
No, go ahead.
Okay, great. So we've got Seven back with us, and as you guys know, we've had him on the show quite a few times, and he's always just such a great inspiration for me. And I like twisting my brain into a pretzel as often as possible, and Seven has an amazing ability to do that. So his websites are theresistance2010.com and astralquest.com, and from those two websites you can get to all the rest of his work out there.
For sure.
Welcome back to the 100th Monkey, Seven.
It's definitely good to be on. It's going to be some 100th Monkey tonight.
So, Seven, I want to start this out tonight with something that, like I mentioned there a moment ago, that I've been twisting my brain into pretzels. And here about a week and a half or so ago, I stumbled across a series of videos online called the Flat Earth Clues. This guy's done an amazing job putting the clues together in a very articulate, concise, and understandable manner. I looked at this briefly years ago and, just kind of breezed past it as that, bullshit thing. And so I actually looked at it a little bit deeper this time, and there's some compelling arguments out there. And so I'm just curious on, what your take on the whole flat Earth theory is.
Well, first of all, I would say thanks for having me back on the show. It's just, it's always amazing to be amongst brothers, and even two other brothers in the studio today. So we're definitely going to get it really lined up today as far as, really exploring the deeper recesses of consciousness. And, just to chime into that subject particularly, which is obviously one that I delved into for quite a bit. And I have a tendency when I'm getting involved with something is I anchor myself to wherever I start, and then I jump right in. So I tend to not be biased when I'm analyzing something. I look for the as above, so below connections, because you can get a really good blueprint for understanding what has truth to it and what may be false. And then when weighing that, you can really come with some good discernment to really determine if what you're learning is actually true or not, or just another part of a hoax, right? And
right.
So I have a tendency also to look at a lot of this stuff not just from the physical perspective, because the physical perspective to me is one of the last emissions, or one of the last things that occurs on the scale of manifestation. Okay, so what I noticed with the flat Earth theory, for me personally, is it was very useful first in me getting out of a spheric world. Okay. And the first the information that kind of hit me about it said something to the tune of that when there was an idea of a new world order, that what was worked with first was the idea of what the world looked like. Like when I say a world now, people visualize this ball and this blue ball, and they see the world from space, right? But the indigenous and all the ancestors supposedly believed that the world was flat. Not supposedly, but they did believe that the world was flat, right? So instead of going into the huge theories, because I know that the world is not a perfect circle at all, like they show it from space. Like nothing is round in it. If anything, it may look like a very chunked off crater or a comet, more so than anything that would resemble something like a perfect sphere, right? But what I started to really tap into as I began to load this information into my mind was an entirely different perspective of looking at the flat Earth theory. And what it introduced was things like, if you happen to be on a planet the size as Jupiter, they could literally rope off the area that you're calling Earth and just keep that over there like quarantine, and no one would know edgewise. In addition to that, I started noticing with the spheric world concept, especially when you look at the word sphere, it's synonymous with fear. that it in fact produces somewhat of a limitation in the mind, because you imagine you're actually inside of a bubble, and then on the outside of that bubble exists a whole nother space, a vacuum in a certain sense, and you're protected as long as you stay inside of this bubble. So this bubble actually becomes more or less your boundary line. And so when I started to, again, load this flat world program, I started to visualize myself now on what I conceived it really was, which is more of a disc. And remember, this is like a hyperdimensional perspective, that instead of looking at Earth as a sphere, it was easier to see it like an actual DVD disc. And that the center was really where the actual escalator, if you may, or the elevator, if you may, up and down into different realms or into other dimensions takes place. So if you make it to the center, then what's in that actual center area, just like inside of your body, is a pole, right, that allows you to be able to go up and down or ascend and descend down into different stages of consciousness. And I found that this layout in the mind was a necessary process in order to get off of the spheric world. So I visualized myself rising up into this disc, but not taking off, though. The first thing that I wanted to do is give edicts. And what I mean by that is, as you're rising up out of the disc, onto the disc, because everyone else is still on that spheric plane, then you also have to pass out to others, basically your bills, what they owe you, per se, or your farewells. You see, so you don't just take off. You raise up. Now everyone's on the spheric world. Here you are. You invite, of course, people to have an opportunity to come onto your disc, meaning to lose the whole spheric world concept and get ready to take off into this next level. And then after you do all that, you promptly begin your voyage. And I found that this voyage was like, let's say, for instance, you now have started onto this disc, but you're on the outer rim of the disc. So now what you need to do is you need to make your way back to the center of the disc. Now, this is also in your consciousness. You have to, for a certain point, make your way back into the central part of your consciousness. We call this understanding. But along the way, your trip from the outer rim to the center, you meet all these characters playing out their roles. Because look how a DVD disc is. It's, the information is recorded in circles, right? So each ring you go to, there's someone there swearing up and down that this is the best place on the disc, that this is the only place that exists, that there is no other world, and this is your process. So that's what I found that was most useful for me in regards to the flat earth theories. Again, I did also notice some very synchronistic things about how some of the models are laid out. I've actually also been studying the concave earth theory, but after a while I started to realize, what does it really matter? Because it doesn't really matter as much to me on an external level, but on an internal level, like I said, it gave me a bigger scope to realize, look, you may be playing a big boys game here. This may even be a roped off area, because I had also my own stuff to prove this, which was I had some images that were taken from Egypt, and one of these images says the world according to the Egyptians, but in this case, the world according to the Kemetans. And what they depicted is that Earth was more or less in a chasm, like a area that was surrounded, once you got far enough, by very high mountains, and then on one end even an ice wall. And so when you do lay that kind of construct out in your mind, if you kind of lay it down a map and you look at it again, it does find itself to be highly supportive, because there is really no one that that has the type of equipment that would be necessary to breach the boundary lines of this planet, meaning the ice wall and the ceiling, which they claim that there's also a glass ceiling. So once again, I was able to gel with it and to vibrate with the concept, because it gave me a lot more insight to, hey, wake up, Alice. You're actually in a space that you can't really validate if this is really flat or if this is really a sphere, especially, you're out on the ocean and you look several miles long and it's just as straight as a ruler, more so than there should be somewhat of a concave or a bowing that begins to occur just in the distance that you can see, because anything like any kind of even what you would call an inorganic structure, but very large, you can calculate the distance from that object and how much that object will begin to bend if it's not straight, and you will still see that bend. So so this should be true for also the horizon. But I started to realize that there is also, because of what I understand about not just the metaphysics, but traveling into different spaces, that one of the spaces actually is located in what we're calling our ocean. And that this space is so deep that it gets into the deeper recesses. So I think what we're more of looking at is we're looking at, if you drain the water off the entire planet, this space that the Cometans would say was originally Earth, let's say, probably resides more in those areas where they still have those cities and things that are long lost and forgotten, and every now and then they uncover one. And then making certain stories like the mountains of Olympia, all right, the Olympian mountains, where they say, oh, the gods or the higher beings lived on top of these mountains, but everyone else lived down in these chasms. But now, after obviously a lot of water coming onto the planet, we've made our way onto the top parts, because that's really what you're looking at. If you drain all the water, once again, you'll see huge ravines, and you'll see where we're actually located on this surface is in some of the more higher ridges that are in the construct. So, these kind of things become very difficult to imagine. If you put it on a flat earth, it definitely says that, well, the ocean is basically a huge puddle, if you may, and it's completely filled with water. And I can, of course, get into a lot of deeper and esoteric knowledge about even how the ocean water became salty, and the stories of Saturn entering into the sphere, and, all that kind of stuff. But I guess I'll desist, because there is a somewhat of another message that that's itching to be itself brought forth tonight. But yeah, so, if you want to ask me anything directly about it, because I did have all the information. I even went over somebody's quite famous's house, and I actually knew I had just got all the information like a week prior, and I actually decided to go ahead and unfold the whole knowledge of the thing. That's why I remember today I did do a long thing on it. It was like 2 or 3 hours, but it was a video. And then when I got home, I still had that video now. I decided not to produce that video because I didn't want the concave earth theories knocking down some of my more abrupt, hey, this is not a theory, this is some real deal, I can prove it right now stuff. And, so it's still kind of on the real.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, the thing that pops into my mind, and the first thing that popped into my mind when I started looking at this was a toroid. The energetic toroid field. And almost every aspect of the flat earth thing that I look at, I see the toroid. And I thank you so much for your analogies to, breaking out of that spherical paradigm and that mindset, because that is tremendously useful for people in their spiritual growth.
For sure. And that kind of brings us even to the first part of today's message, which is about breaking the thought boundaries. As you see, I sent you there earlier because, I really, I tapped into some stuff, man, that was just so deep. It wasn't too deep for me. I've just gotten really quite used to this, but I just came off of shooting a documentary called Diamond Tree, which is actually highlighting the use of dimethyltryptamine and its effects, not only its effects, but also its effects around the elements. So I think that there's very little constructive use of these psychoactive substances, mainly ayahuasca and DMT, not so much as LSD and many of the other inorganic substances, only because you really would need to be a master at operating your mind before you can get on something like LSD and see its full potential. While things like ayahuasca, and which its key derivative is dimethyltryptamine, have actual bioorganic connection with the planet. So you're experiencing somewhat of a quantum experience that you can authenticate as even in your feelings that this is really going on, not I'm tripping. You see what I mean? So you have a hard time. You don't have a hard time separating the two. So the main thing is, though, is that if nobody's ever talked to you about it, if nobody's said anything about it, this becomes a thought boundary. Like if we never talk about other things and have factual data on how to prove it, we won't conceive anything, right? So these are what I call thought boundaries. And so today, what I would like to introduce is we started with the flat earth. That's another thought boundary to be broken, is how we see earth, where we see that we're actually positioned in the galaxy, et cetera. Because when you start playing with that, and this is another thing that I realized was very useful in the knowledge, when you start playing with that, you also start moving your own craft. You start moving your own vehicle of consciousness through other space. And that's why I kind of brought it forth like, okay, you're getting on this disc, because what I literally felt is once I start unsubscribing to the spheric world, it seemed to promptly release me. I started to be able to prove more that maybe it's really a disc. At some point, again, maybe, like you were saying, maybe it's a torus, and then I realized what was going on. See, when you're pulling out of it, you have different geometric shapes. You may come first out of a straight line pyramid into a cone, into a dodecahedron, into a torus, onto a disc, then into a pentagram. You see what I mean? Because that's how the worlds are constructed. They're constructed with frequency, which is really more of cymatics. It's easier to explain it like cymatics, where when you pull off of this, you see nests. That's the easiest way to explain it. Nests weaved with the same patterns of cymatics that equate to the worlds that everyone is still actually in, moving through the tubes or the wires that are used to draw out this cymatic pattern. And on top of that the cymatic patterns are still obeying some kind of blueprint that has been, that they've been crafted with, mainly with the phi. Okay, so I realized what the physical worlds were is the externalization. So it's, in a certain sense, the physical and external world is every bit of what's known in the Gnostic tradition as the Yalda Baal, is every bit of the external male component, because anytime you call up something, evoke something, you're still only taking a piece, which is why there's a P in Pope and Pi and papacy and poets and all of that P, even the phallic symbol, right? In the pentagram, it also is all a symbolism of something protruding, right? So that's one of our bodies. I'm not here today to talk about which one's good and bad. I've gone way, I blew past good and bad. And in fact, I realized you can't get out of, and I'm gonna give you a more correct visualization. It looks like a hourglass, okay? You can't get out of the hourglass of duality until you at least rise from the bottom half, which I'm just calling the bottom pyramid, go through that center point where the grains are coming down at. That's actually the sun. The sun is actually a hole. When you really get into this, if flat Earth is the least of your mind-blowing levels, the next one is that the sun is not a sphere either. It's a disk. But that disk is the opening of, it's an aperture. That's the easiest way to explain it. It's the aperture to the other side of what exists. You see what I mean? So that's also the little small opening in the hourglass. So once you can go up through there, okay, that point also is known as the top of the bottom pyramid. That's why they always show in the triangle, and they call it now the Illuminati. I mean, they just want to take over all the symbolism. But on that top part, that eye is the sun. And then once you go through that eye, then you come out on the other side. But see, the other stars are eyes too, and the moon is an eye. Okay, so this means that there is numerous portals to go through, but you're still only seeing 4% of them. When you're using 4 to 5% of your consciousness, you will only see 4 to 5% of the reality. So even if they go to Pluto, if they make it to Mars, whatever, if they do it in 3D, they'll never see anything there. And beside what fits in 3D objects, dense objects, you won't see helium and different kind of things like that. You still won't see that kind of stuff until you raise into the frequencies that stuff is on. And then you see it's also not just gas. It has some kind of life form to itself too. So the easiest way to explain this is if a person drives down the street in 3D, in their 3D car, When you ask them, what did you see? They'll say, oh yeah, I saw some buses, I saw some buildings, because they're seeing in 3D. But if you take off on that, down that same street, which you can, let's say for instance, you pop the diamond tree and then you start walking down that street. Now you're going to see about 35% of what's really there. So when you ask that person, because that's what they've done, they've now turned their body up to the energetic potential of, let's say, 35% of the amount of energy that we can contain. So then when that person, they'll start seeing all sorts of things. You'll see prints, meaning things that have also been done in that same space that have left heavy energetic signatures. You'll start being able to actually feel more than anything different things that have taken place. So what I'm getting to you is that every time you let someone go in and pursue something like consciousness that's not operating on 40, 50%, let's say, of their own consciousness, all they're going to come back with is a 3D perspective of what they feel like is going on there. And I feel like many traditions have been interpreted such ways. Many things that we're experiencing in life that have much more of a mystical value are being interpreted as such. If you cast the pearls to swine and then you allow the swine to come back and read back to you what the value of the pearl is, then it's not going to have any knowledge and information for you. You need someone that actually knows what the pearl really consists of and why it's so precious, right? So let's get into some stuff here. Let's talk about so let's talk about the power, okay? Because I'm also here today because I got power for people. And we need to understand that our power is not in money. Our power is in our resources, our aura, okay? And let me explain this very simple, how things are flip-flopped between the ones who are sovereign, even the ones that are in control, versus the many servants and slaves that are still running around trying to find something to worship. And this is because if you really think about it, people are now told that if they get some money, then they can have this car, they can have this boat, they can have all the things that they really want, right? But the people who create the money know that they actually need the trees. They actually need the wood, the rubber. They need that mine. So they need the actual resource itself. And the money is not something that is going to be able to allow them to get that. They're going to have to get that by taking it. Okay? So this is the flip-flop of how the system actually works. Is the first thing is for us to realize that our real power is within the energetic potential of our consciousness, how intelligent we are, and mainly how much energy, how much kilojoules can you really pump off from your body. And this is why the body is actually a time machine. Okay, and it just so happens that the primary body that we're using now, the physical body, has become so much more dominant, and we've lost the knowledge of what it really is capable of doing. We can't shift it anymore into what it can be shifted to almost immediately. So I'm talking about a real shapeshifter. And the reason why we participated in shape-shifting is because that's how we endure through time. Okay, when the cosmic wind blows a different way, now we need to survive another kind of way. There may be a foreign bacteria. So we need to shapeshift, i.e., or evolve very rapidly into something that can survive, or else we become extinct. And the most easiest way to kind of depict this is something like this mythology about Oannes, okay, the fish man, right? This is a simple metaphor that, first of all, if you really understand the story, the people lived on an island. So they thought that it was more prime to have a body that can walk on land and, of course, a body that can live in the ocean. So they morphed themselves into fish men and fish women, okay? Because it's the primary vehicle that would work out best. Nowadays, what we do is we'll go grab a wetsuit, aqua lung, and that kind of stuff when we want to get in the water. See, because that's called inorganic, false, fake, illusionary technology. Not because it's not real, but because we have a far more superior system that allows us, if you say, hey, I need to go swimming, boom, you can evolve right away into having the type of lungs that a fish has and then go on about your swim. But if you don't know you can do that, you end up becoming dependent. So the whole reality is designed on dependencies, ending with a dependency on the sun and a dependency on the moon. This is where it all concludes. And I'm going to explain why. What we're seeing as the sun and what we're seeing as the moon are also receptacles. Okay, they are reservoirs. So what the sun holds is the sun holds the positive information or the future. Okay, now it just so happens that because we're still in a circuit or a circle, that the future is written. You can, based on the trajectory of your life, you can go and see what will happen next if you choose not to change your course, i.e. change your frequency. Okay, so that's what you can view in the sun. You can see the future. While the moon is actually a receptacle for the past. Okay, now remember, the sun is also a receptacle for the future, i.e. positivity, while the moon is a receptacle for the past, i.e. negativity. Not meaning bad or good, but it is still quite ironic that most great things take place during the day, while really bad things happen sometimes at night, right? But let me explain how this really works. What happens is that, see, if you get into doing something very repetitious, like living fake lives, okay, because we're thinking we die, all this crazy stuff we got going on right now, but living day after day after day, right? So what's going to really denote if I say, hey, do you remember what you did last March? You're going to laugh because it's like, last March, homie, I'm trying to figure out what I did last week. Okay? Because if there is no spikes or high points, but let's say, for instance, last March you won the lottery, and I asked you, hey, do you remember what you did last March? Yeah, I won the lottery. Like, how could I ever forget? You see, it's because that event spiked a frequency that now becomes your reference point to be able to remember that space and time. So the same thing happens to somebody who parties a lot. If you ask them, hey, do you remember what club you were at last Friday? He's like, man, I can't even tell you. Like, unless something happened, if they got into a fight or they saw some female walk in that was just amazing and she said, hey, right? So, oh yeah, I remember I was there last Friday. Man, I was there and she kid this girl. You see? So the person can remember based on something more major happening than the norm. So guess what? The sun and the moon are always the major thing happening that's not in the norm. And that's how they become the receptacles to the memories that we're creating here. And then what the sun and the moon have done as perpetual beings is they take in the memory and then push back out the seed of the memory. This is perpetual energy. So what I'm saying is your experience in the sunlight, having fun, dancing is good. You know, you're on the beach, bam, this is it. Gets also pulled into the sun because that's the memory bank. It's the receptacle for what's happening during the day. And then it takes that energy, and this is where you learn that thoughts are energy. Imagination is energy. When you get into the higher part of your body, you realize language doesn't even come into play. You're using more of your imagination. But let me not skip ahead here, because it's the same thing as if I told you and you believed me, you knew I was bona fide, and I said, look, you're going to get $1 million tomorrow. You won, you lucky bastard. Right? And then something happened, you fill out some ticket, you know that you're going to win tomorrow. How are you going to act? You're not even going to be able to sleep. Who knows? Like if they called you and said, hey, you know, you just got to wait till tomorrow, but you can pick the money up. You won. What's going to happen is you're going to get all this energy based on the idea. And this is where we now need to understand how to really work our consciousness or steer this UFO now, because it's now an unidentified flying object. That's the consciousness. It's so funny how it's unidentified, meaning nobody knows about it really. They don't know that they're actually inside of this thing. They don't know how to fly it, but it flies. Now let's look at this compass, the mathematical compass. Okay, this is what the Masonic sign is. It's a compass, right? So has anybody thought about and looked for a moment and noticed that compass is a man?
What do you mean is a man?
It's a man. The top part, that little top part of the compass that you generally spin, that's the head. The two little sides that sometimes you kind of hook your fingers around and make sure you hold that thing, those are the arms. And then the two things, one side contains the pin, that's that you stick down the paper so it doesn't move, and the other side contains the pencil so that you can turn it and make a perfect circle. You see what I mean? So I need to make sure that you got this visualization, okay? So you've seen that mathematical compass, okay? So that tool right there is actually the symbol of man, okay? And this is like the symbol of the A, okay? And so this tool also, even in Spanish, let me get the correct title because I just learned about this the other day and I said, there's another sync with it, but let me just type it here real quick. Compass in Spanish is brújula, okay? Which has its cognate, bru actually means, B-R-U-J means witch, okay?
Bruja,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what it hit it again. I said, you know what? Okay, so the story is being told right there. The body is actually, because when you use the protractor, the most important part of this is to calculate degrees with it. And the reason why you need to calculate degrees when you're messing around with star systems is you got to calculate the parallax. Because this is like, if you're traveling to Earth, but you overshoot it 1 degree, you're not going to make it to Earth by far. So you need to be precise. So what the bodies are what they're calibrated to do is that you can calculate the parallax or the distance between here and another star system and actually make the trip. That's what we were doing before. And then on top of that, okay, now you get to plug in another story. They told you that where Earth is positioned, whatever shape it is on a highway. So this starts to explain to you why maybe some people may have stopped off at Hotel Earth in a certain tense. You've seen the lights on and decided to dive in for a quick visit, and then all of a sudden, on the island of Amazons, forgot that you've even been here so long. Because what this really is it's more or less a nest. Some could call it a trap. I think it was even set up by the fishers of men, and that's really what they mean by that. You can set up this nice cymatic web that looks so wonderful, and then when a being comes by it, old Jabalon, the spider, which is the eight-pointed star, et cetera, just encompass and gets the person all wrapped up in it. And then the more the person moves around, this means the more that you use words, the more that you bring your seeds here, the more you can really get entangled in it, right? So now what we need something of a sword to cut ourselves out of all of this that's been building up around us, where other people, and this is what I saw in when I went into these vast consciousness, because I went in like 19 times, okay? So I rent the veil asunder. So the reality that I was being showed was, see, even the guy that owned the Muppet Babies, okay, he had another idea. He had another kind of world that he wanted to build. So this is also why you got to worry about even getting caught up in other people's dreams, okay?
Right.
This is getting caught up in someone else's or someone else's imagination that's willing to use you, your thought, your processor, your self-evolving OS or operating system, to actually allow them to construct yet another part of their whole hive. Okay, so let me explain this. So and this is something that everyone's doing. This is not, it can get to very powerful levels, especially if you know what you're doing. But as a general concept, people do it anyway. Women, they can have you all in their dream and their idea and plan for years and years in the future about what you're going to be doing without even asking you if you want to participate in that. Men can do the same thing. So this is what I'm talking about with being caught up in someone else's dream. But some people dream stronger. So in a certainty, they say, well, we're going to create these Muppet Babies. All these Muppet Babies are going to be these different archetypes that we're going to actually use as eidolons. And then later on, when each person is identified with a certain one of the Muppet Babies, then we'll just keep hitting those triggers throughout the rest of their life in order to get them to do things. How does that sound, Jack? Oh, man, that's amazing. How did you come up with this? Oh, it looked like it was some of the ancient concepts of how things were going on in Egypt. Well, let me get that book. Send that over to my house, brother. Okay, brother, bye. You see, because what we forget that we've been on here for this long periods of thousands of years is that there's covens here. And all of the stuff that I'm telling you about being immortal, like, you don't have to try to be immortal. You are immortal. It's just about whether you're in conscious immortality. Do you ever remember yourself dying? You see what I mean? So you don't actually die. That's why you don't remember yourself dying. it's just like a no-brainer. But if you're watching everyone else die and then you're associating yourself with those other people, that can always happen in a very difficult. Something can happen in the matrix that you see that you interpret the wrong way, is what I'm saying.
Right.
So what we're talking about is we're talking about getting to the level of being able to get our consciousness in the back, back in the right order. So I'm going to take a quick moment here and just let's see if we want to examine some of the concepts that I've talked about thus far a little bit more closely, or if we want to just keep going with this and get into the depth of it, because again, this is just the beginning of the message. And but it can open some tunnels to things that are going to be necessary to travel down as far as paths on the way out of this thing.
Right. Yeah. One thing that did come to mind to me when you were talking about the sun and moon being portals and their polarities is I saw well the moon is definitely has an interesting cycle as far as being up during the daytime also. Mm-hmm. So, which kind of explains for all the crap that people do go through, that maybe not be as extreme as some of the stuff that happens during darkness, but or to the same degree, I suppose. Or
well, yeah, because there's no sunset and sunrise for the sun. Somebody put it that way one time, and that cleared it up right there. Like the sun.
It's same thing, yeah. Same thing for the moon, and it definitely in our skies. So I just saw it as really making sense that that absorption factor that it has.
Exactly,
right?
And then and another thing to chime in on is because you also have to realize the same thing happens with the stars. And just like in the daytime, the stars are still out. It's just the sun is blinding everything. And this is why I started to crack into that you're getting about 4 to 5% of the reality. But see, this is all real framework, the beings that we're dealing with. When I saw how far I was able to go, it only made me shudder at the thought of how far something else could have gone, especially if they knew what they were doing. That's how you just reverse engineer the whole thing. But what I saw is that if you see about 4 to 5% of the stars, and that's because what the stars really are, what these portals really are, is they're emitting the programs. And let me explain how this works. Now, when you're dealing with the core programs, like the 4 elements, these are the most, as a builder, these are the most difficult elements to deal with. And it's because they are firm in what they are. Fire, earth, wind, water are firm. And now you must mix them and make them to come together. So this is like literally every time you would pour them together as an alchemist, they would explode, destroying you too. You see what I mean? So only the masters could work with the 4 elements. So what everyone else chose to do that was still in this craft of what would be organic technology was they used pre-configured frequencies. Okay, it's easier to see deities as that they are pre-configured complex frequencies. They're not just fire, earth, wind, water in different variations. They got attitude. And this is because they lived through different experiences where fire mixed with wood, water, and then that married this family, and now you get this being, okay? And this is how the Kemetans were building realities, is because they would take a more complex being to bring an entire frequency into a reality. So just like in this reality of Earth, I can explain every single thing going on here within 4 archetypes. One is the goddess Leb. She's Sophia. She's a lioness. This is the secret to the Sphinx. We are inside of her dream, which is inside of her womb. And her consciousness is basically constantly devoted to dealing with these badass kids. Now, the other thing I want you to understand about all these things, like the sun and the moon, they all have 2 sides. Anything in physicality always has a positive and negative side. It just has more of a predominant side. That's why, just like us, we're male and female, primarily males. Where you got, of course, male, female, primarily females, but still containing both poles. So that's Sophia. She's going to be always doing this, but her dream, remember, is big. Her thought boundary is much further than ours. So what happens is that when we elect to get into that side of our consciousness, which we call wholeness, it becomes like a whole, literally, just like the feminine principle stands for. It's not trackable in a certain tense. You just need to figure out how to anchor yourself and dive on in, okay? Now that's Leb. Her son, which is why you always see Mary and then the child right there. The child in her hand is Yaldabaoth. Okay, and that entity in specific is what I was saying earlier in the conversation, the externalization. That's why if you look at the pictures of the Black Madonna or the Madonna of the Virgin Mary, when you see the son, he's got a crown on his head because he is the king, meaning that he's the embodiment of the world of a physical male that was the first male here, that has all of the issues that we've been dealing with gods like Jehovah, entities like Saturn, and even beings like Jesus. It all sums up into the same externalized male character. Then the only other floating point between that character is also known as the Jackal. He's also known as the Joker. He's not just a 0 card, he's a 0 and a 1. So that means that he's trapped between worlds. This is what the god's problem is. He's a 10. So that means that you actually have access to both worlds. Now, here's the interesting thing I also want people to know. When I'm talking about these characters, I'm not talking about anything that's separate to them. I'm talking about actual thought forms that are operating inside of their consciousness. That's where all of this stuff really exists. And that's why it was known that the eidolons, which were the archons or the archetype, were going to be really the last trials of this dimension. This is like when you go against the Olympians. And this is because these forms normally stand in the position of being your elder and being over you, or being the limit to where you can go. God, for most people, is the limit to where they can go, right? So that means that God, in a sense, is the gatekeeper. So until you reach God, realize what exactly is going on, and that you're really looking in a mirror, and then you walk through that mirror. And then you realize that you are even beyond a God. You're actually a supreme being. Other than that, you stay down with the other programs and how they operate, right? So this is the construct that we're looking at. So here's another interesting thing, because I just really want to get the meat of the conversation in play before we go into other things. Now, there's another thing that I actually noticed, because I remember I've read about 12 to 20,000 books on just heavy levels of ancient knowledge, okay? So none of the new stuff, none of the Deepak Chopra, just straight into it. So there's actually one being that pops up quite a bit in every culture, and the being was generally known as the dweller, okay? The dweller of the threshold, they would call it, because it was the last being that you would see before leaving the body. Okay, so it was like a gatekeeper. Some people drew it as a grim reaper of some sort, okay? Right. And what this is this is a part of consciousness that is the embodiment of that old king that I was telling you about earlier. And where it set itself up, because it does operate as in a hive also, is it set itself up right inside of the person's mind. So here's how it works. The first time that you began to talk to yourself in a language, okay, because as I said, let us go down and confuse them. What are you going to confuse them with? Language. So that way they'll just won't even know what each other's talking about. Some people don't even read deep enough into that. It's not just the different languages and tongues. That's a part of it. But the other part is that if we have something that's inside of our mind that's talking to us, and it incites us to not like someone or to hate against something, and this is normally the behavior that it keeps up, we have to distinguish whether that's even us. Okay? But see, if this thing starts talking before you even realize what's even going on, what happens is you often confuse it for you. So this is how I caught it. At around 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, I've already taken off, meaning I've already gone into the substance and I'm pretty much out of the body. I'm just kind of hanging out. This is like what I call hanging at the gate. You don't go into the other realm, which is like going into an astral plane, but you don't actually stay in Earth either. This is like it's like I call it the cosmic surfer, because where you're actually riding is right between both worlds. So I'm right between both worlds on one of these adventures around 4:30 in the morning. And then I feel it. Now, the other thing about when you're in between both worlds is you're hypersensitive, because everything is really trying to get you to get back into the frequency. It wants to stuff you back in. It's like, hey, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. And this is what I found that this dweller in the mind has as its issue the most. Because for you not to talk in your mind, for this being is like for it to hold its breath. Okay, so listen to what I'm saying. If you're not talking and chattering in your mind, especially about gossiping against other people and deception and all the rest of what comes with that, this being can't breathe. So it's constantly, you can feel it attempting to worm its way back into your aura with thoughts. Hey, now I told you, I do the analogy like this. If it's got you bad, then you're like, man, I don't even like this, how this earth is ridiculous and these people around it. That's when it's got you bad. When it's got you just a little bit, then you're like, man, I wonder if I need to pick up the kids from school tomorrow, what's going on with the wife. If it barely has you, it's like, hey, are we supposed to be talking while you meditate? And if you have complete mind control, you don't hear anything. And then when you block it out, I was able to do this by every time I started to talk, I would just say, cancel. Cancel. It was kind of strange, but I had to do something, because the first time that I recognized it on one of the first days, I was, like I said, in the 430 range. Nothing was going on. My mind was so calm. It was wonderful. And then all of a sudden I felt this strange movement. I just call it the Jabberwocky, because that word sounded like the way that it moved. And I was like, what the hell is this? It's even kind of spooky. And then my higher mind comes in like a pinhole minuscule. It's just like, yo, watch this. Meaning I don't want to talk to you too much because you're going to fall off the wave if I do, but watch this. And then what I started witnessing was this frequency started coming in during the time that the sun was rising. And then when this frequency started coming in, it immediately went into the minds of the people that were already asleep, if it wasn't already in their minds. And this is from the area that I was in specifically, because you can hear all the minds. It's the strangest thing when you get into this hypersentience. But then when I was listening to all the minds, when it entered another guy's mind, this is how it came in on him. You need to get up. Oh man, I'm tired. Man, look, you need to actually finish doing the room. This is what the conversation was. You need to finish doing the room on the end of the house, because until you finish the room, we can't sell the house. Okay? And then the guy said, he said, man, but it's 6 o'clock in the morning. If I turn on the saw right now, the neighbors are going to go nuts. Then the thing comes back in again and said, they don't pay your bills. So then look, the guy gets up and then he cuts on the saw, and sure enough, you hear the saw come on. This is what I'm trying to explain to you. I'm not joking, or you know me, I don't got time to play at all. This is exactly what was going on, and how easy it was to read all the minds when nothing is in your mind. Okay, so then this is what happened next. So when the saw cuts on, then I see the thing or the frequency move so fast. It was like the Azazel from the Fallen movie. It jumped right away into the guy that was in the house that was next door from where we were, and it hit him, bam. And he said, oh my goodness, I can't believe blah, blah, blah is using the saw at this early in the morning. What the? And he cursed, right? And then he turned over and he said, honey, wake up. And she said, I'm already awake. How can I sleep? You need to go and talk to him. And then I saw a reflection in her mind that said, but I like his wife. So if he says something crazy, maybe we won't be friends. Now, I'm not going to give you any more of the rest of the story. But what I started realizing is that this thing, it gets up early. And it starts, pardon my French, fucking with people's mind, to get them all into this back and forth. So that way this dimension can keep running, because it's billions, it's a countless numbers of these causes and effects that create the frequency or the cymatic pattern that actually is making the reality look real. And the moment that we decide that we don't want to subscribe to it, and then we can lock it out long enough for it to die, then what happens is we pop into this higher part of our body. And I actually witnessed this on an energetic level. So before I got there, though, there was something also that was very clear, that where this being resides, if you wanted to give it like a diagram, was the top of the lower pyramid of the body. Okay, so if you separated your body into two halves, where the pyramid was on the bottom, the top of the pyramid is the navel of the lower pyramid. And then from that point, the top of the higher pyramid, like an hourglass, connects right there. Okay. And so, this, most of the time, people are in the lower pyramid. In fact, the G in gravity, which is also a 6, actually is the symbol really of the king, because it is through gravity that we're aging, and that we have to consistently work on keeping our frequency up. You see what I mean? Like if we didn't have gravity, it wouldn't be hard to stay in a great mood all the time, because your energy, which is a real thing, wouldn't be pulled down all the time into your feet. Or they call it the soul, or pulling down into the lower end of the body. So you can even see with the breathing techniques, the whole goal is to rise the Kundalini. You're trying to breathe. And then when you do that enough and then you hold your breath, the Kundalini, which is, I'm still investigating exactly what it is, it can't breathe, okay? It breathes like prana. So when it's denied of the prana, then it starts to make its way up the spine. It's like an automatic reflex of it. It's like some shit off of Stargate SG-1 or something. It thinks that you're dying. So now it actually has to make its trip. I think that this is why they associate a lot of times this with the serpent, and the serpents are even sometimes associated with the souls, etc., because it may be like the state of a nubile soul, a soul that's not very developed. It would just be a worm in a tense, okay? And then when this worm is deprived of life, if for some reason you die, like you hit by a car or whatever, you get too old. Once it gets deprived of the prana, it starts making its way to make its exit point out of the top of it comes from the roof of your mouth and then out of the top of your head, okay? And this is also why in the other traditions, they say when you eat the prana, this is food, vegetables, air, water, all this stuff contains prana. You live in the pranayama, meaning that in every tense you are what you eat. The only way that you're really aware of this reality from hard-coded levels is because you're eating. Because stop eating for a while, then all of a sudden the reality starts looking different. This is the same thing as if you stop sleeping for a while, or you stop drinking water for a while. All this stuff is definitely connected. But again, I'll desist for a moment and just let us digest that.
This Kundalini breath, that's I guess a good term for it. What's this look like? I mean, is there a practice there, or
for
do you
sure.
know?
It's forcing air into the diaphragm. It's reverse breathing. Like basically, what happens is somehow if you don't understand the breathing thing, if you don't really ever play with it, for some reason, I think we can again blame this on gravity. We start breathing backwards. So the first thing that you really see is that we're actually breathing backwards, because when you take a breath in, your stomach is supposed to poke out, not go in. For a lot of people, when they take a breath in, the stomach actually goes in. How is that happening? It's because the person is breathing backwards. So then there's also this area that's right above. It's like in the bottom area of the back. They call it the diaphragm. Now it comes out that the diaphragm, which are these small pockets, can actually hold air. Okay? So this is they call this whole body breathing. So when you breathe into this diaphragm and you fill it up a little bit, you start to feel strange. You feel like somebody punched you in the chest a little bit and you're about to pass out kind of, but you're not passed out. And this is through the cultivation and the art of this kind of breathing, you actually learn how to get into the other world. We call that, though, the front door. It's called the front door because you're actually using your breath to get into the other realm. Why the back door is when you use substances to get into the other realm. Now, both of them are pretty tough, and there's a tendency for you need to understand how to do both in order to stay awake. And this is also kind of what, it's kind of off topic, but Michael Jackson's Beat It video is really about. Because what happens is that this Kundalini stuff also ties directly into your sexual channel. And so when you go into this high state, you actually have to maintain yourself from going into an orgasm. And then when you can, in a tense, suppress that orgasm but stay in the mood, that's when you keep breaching further and further. And this is because we leak. So these are like what I call they're like I would say safety mechanisms within the human body for not allowing it to get into high frequency. One is passing out, and the other one is bliss. So, of course, when you experience this, because, you got to train yourself to be able to do this. So at a certain point, as you're taking these breaths, when you breathe in, for a moment, you don't even feel like you need to breathe out because the body is so oxygenated. You've put in so much oxygen in your blood, like a fish. The body is feeding on the blood and the oxygen. It doesn't need you to breathe. But The mind, which is really easy to trick, you can hack the mind. The mind is used to breathing in certain segments, like numbers, we breathe in, we breathe out, we breathe in, we breathe out. It's on like a mechanical hive mind kind of operating system until you hack it. So when you hack it and you start taking all these breaths and then you hold, then what happens is that you don't feel like you need to take a breath because you really don't. And I did hear someone drop out, so just make sure everyone's there.
Right, we're here.
Okay, so you don't need to take a breath because you don't really need to take a breath. You're feeding from the oxygen in your blood. But the mind thinks you need to take a breath. So it says, oh shit, he's not taking a breath. We should pass out because if we pass out, we can get back control of whatever is happening that he's not taking a breath. So then the body passes out. But guess what? You're still there. And this is how you get into the other world, through the front door, because when the mind shuts off and passes out and you're still there, then you see it. And I've only seen it this way one time. And there was a guy in front of me and he immediately turned into something else. And that's all I'll say about that because and then as this comes back, because you come back, the thing about the front door is that it's really easy to get back into the reality versus if you take the back door and one of these substances are too strong and you can't get back in, it could be what they call a bad trip, right? But as the frequency was going back down after I went through the front door, the guy slowly started coming back into what I saw him as in the regular reality. And I said, man, this is what...
Yeah, I experienced the same thing. Well, I've had the out-of-body experiences, so it's much the same experience.
For sure. I mean, it definitely matches up to the same thing, but, it's wild over here. Like,
oh, no shit. No shit.
And this is crazy because remember, as men and women, we're here in this world. Like, I just got here. Like, I didn't sign up for all of this. Like, for all I knew, that it was all just straight and narrow. You do what you're supposed to do. If you end up being misfortunate, you try to make it. You really try to not let the odds stack against you, and you fight your way into success. But that ain't what's going on here, Doc. Like this is, and as I said, when I went into these other frequencies, more than me saying, oh my God, I have this ultimate energy and power, because you can feel all that too. I was more like, oh my goodness. Because my mind immediately starts reverse engineering. That's how I got as far as where I'm at now. It says immediately, 7, if you don't even know what you're doing, and you're here, imagine beings that are here, but they know what they're doing. What could they be doing in this? Because you have so much energy. Here's the thing. When you think about the sun, you turn into one. And then all of a sudden, you can see this in your mind. The frequency spikes. You can hear it in your ear. It goes, and then when that happens, you feel this pulse come off your body, okay? Then it hits something, and this is what I found to be quite interesting. I think that this is the purpose of the aura. It's a containment unit. The energy pulsed, hit the outer part of this torus, because it was definitely a torus, and then it sent it back in. Okay, so this, remember, I haven't been trained by anybody. I don't have any gurus to sit on the lap of and all this. So
protect us from everybody else.
Exactly. So, so what I figured though is what you do is once you send it out, when it hits that wall and starts coming back, then you hit it back, like tennis, and to the point where you start kicking up your field so high that you're actually able to, if you wish, to bring this power into 3D. And we can talk about that just lightly here. So what I realized is that when you get into the higher triangle, now you really can do something. Now you have some power to do something, but you're not even talking to yourself, by the way. That's the only way you could have got there. So your imagination is doing everything. So you talk through your imagination. And so the explanation that I got, because I do want to help people, so I asked, how can I at least help my family? I said, the best thing that you can do, and it is just you, okay? You're very clear that you're talking to yourself. There's no other God. You're just pinging and sending the information back to you. God's talking to God because both of them are you. So when you say, what can I do for my family? It says the best thing you can do is pull them closer to the sun. And you say, well, why? And remember, you're not saying this, you're thinking this. Why should I pull them closer to the sun? What does that do? That's our whole mind, our questionable mind. Because anything that everything will eventually see the light. Now, let me explain to you how this works. When we went into this cave, because one of the things was we did earth element. So we went into this cave. We got deep into this cave, and there was this little green plant. It was the only one there. It was quite fascinating. And it was growing in the darkness, and it was so green. And then the ominous voice from the mind says, see, the light even reaches down here. You know that because it's called far infrared, but notice you can't see it. It looks dark down here, but it's still here. So just understand there's another kind of light that doesn't appear bright, but it nurtures things just the same. And so this will also allow you to get out of the whole save the world program and, oh, I'm going to feel sorry if we end up leaving everyone behind and blah, 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 all this stuff that we go through that we know we're not even in charge of changing, because everyone here, even the little bitty plant that's stuck in the bottom of the cave, will eventually see the light. So this means that everyone in this incarnation, whatever the story is here and who's in control and all of that stuff, it's still going to get to a point where they realize that, hey, I came from there. So see, all of the beings that were here before, they knew that. They knew we were all family and that we were sprayed from an area that never has darkness. Because you can start seeing now the stars in the sun as holes poked in, okay? And just a little bit of the light is seeping in, because if you open up too much of it, that'll be the end of this world. You see what I mean? Like, imagine if the world looked completely like what it looks like when you look in the sun. You won't survive there on a physical level. And this is why they say this, the importance of this. Like, I did get to the bottom of why all this is going on, because I was in there just working to get the answers to the questions. So I said, why is all this stuff going on, talking to self, with the whole world and the Illuminatis and all this other stuff? And I just have to spend time trying to figure this out. And I feel like somebody always out to get me. I said, look, okay, stop. It's because you wanted two bodies. You wanted one for the external world and one for this internal world, and you thought it was great. And so this is what you got. So every being wants this. Every being wants two bodies, but no being wants to be out of control of their bodies. So now you need to, instead of primarily existing in that lower body, which is what you've got trapped into, you need to start coming up here more often, just hanging out here. There's nothing really to talk about, nothing really to see. If you really know how to, if you really know how to do it, and you're charging yourself. Okay, so this is what I realized. Instead of going in all the time into even the higher chakras, well, even if you can say you were in the higher chakras, and start visualizing all these different things that you want to happen in the world, because that's still all lower chakra stuff, you just hang out in the higher chakra space. And when you're up there, it's constantly regenerating your vehicle. It's like, let's say, for instance, as a visualization, millions of nano beings that are just healing every single part of your consciousness. So that way, when you wake back up or choose to activate again physical body, it's as if it didn't age. Not to mention, I think that this is the secret to non-aging. And it's because the other thing about when I got into the higher chakra is I couldn't feel my weight. Okay? And this is because, now remember, all this stuff is spinning. So let's say, for instance, your primary energy is spinning in the lower half of your body, and somehow you end up moving it into the top half. What this causes is somewhat of where you have a propeller in the top part of your body, and this seems to help you cancel out gravity, so you don't actually feel the weight. You feel like you're basically sunk in some Charmin tissue, like you're basically in this cloud. And I believe that when you're in that state, the body can really heal. Because if you think about it, the isobaric chamber and the bath with the Epsom salt, the weightless chambers, they allow the body
sensory deprivation.
It's simply sensory deprivation, these kind of things. And every bit of sensory deprivation allows you to regenerate this sense. And I'm glad you said that. And it was because what was also being explained to me by me is that, look, see, when you see, hear, taste, smell, touch a lot, you get doled out. So after a while, you can't actually see, hear, taste, smell, touch like you were able to do when you first got there. Your senses are dull. So the only way that you can repair those is to shut them all down and then start opening them back up one by one so that you can see what they really do. So you can know what they're responsible for doing. And this was a very interesting introspection, because then when I went into that, I realized that what your nose has is a string of tentacles that go out quite far. And that's what gives you the ability to smell. You're not picking this stuff up in the wind. It's totally contrary to everything that they're teaching, but no brainer. Everything here is upside down. It's opposite to the way it really is. They tell you we pull in these pheromones and things and smell them, and that's how we sense them. Maybe that's how the physical body senses them. How the spirit senses them is it has a ray or a beam, i.e. a tentacle, that is flung out over everything. And when it lays on something, it then interacts with that and sends back to the nose. You smell that? And this is also why the nose is not just responsible for smelling, it's responsible for sensing. Animals use it to sense. They sense danger, they sense fear. So how, you can't smell danger or fear, can you? They tell, oh yeah, it's because the sweat smells it. Stop. It's because this organism has a tentacle coming from it. And so, this was quite interesting to see, because then this is what the real thing was that I realized, how they can switch a 0 to the 1 and then everything is backwards. So what happened was, as we were going through these elements, we realized that the fire was the foundational principle, not earth. So think about it. Most people see earth as the foundation, right? This is where we came from. We came from earth. Earth is our foundation. Wrong. We came from the light. The light is closest to fire. Fire was first. Fire is father. And fire is the foundation. And that's the F. Okay? So, but you see how if we think in our minds, just like the spheric world concept, that earth is really the foundation, we switch a 0 to a 1, and then that turns everything around for us. It confuses us. So that way, when we go to make another assumption based on that previous assumption, we now have determined something based on lies, and that's how illusions are created. So at the end of the day, what you're dealing with is what I call a self-evolving operating system, or a supermind. What it's doing is it's harnessing everyone's experiences, everyone's thoughts, our causes and effects to our different experiences, loading all of that in to track the abyss. Okay? And then on top of that, the reward for this, because I'm not saying it's malevolent or benevolent, it's just how we're getting along right now. The reward for doing this is once you get a complete seed, which happens in a certain period of time, that you would even know that the stars dictate if you knew the star that controls that cycle. Once it's done, a new template comes out. And see that, so the previous template of all the self-evolving OS experiences, called the hive, is now the human body. And this is just one cluster. In another cluster, it could be a whole different kind of being that's far more advanced. You see what I mean? So, but we have access to all of it. And this is it, because it doesn't actually belong to anyone in that sense. Because here's the last thing that I really want you to understand. So when I was on this substance again, right, and I'm walking through one of the jungles that it's a reserve and few people walk through it, okay? I started noticing, because my third eye was wide open, that there were other beings there, but all of them were camouflaged. And it was only because I was moving at about 1,000 frames per second as far as my vision that I could see them camouflaged on what they were camouflaging into. So I asked a simple question: why are you hiding? And it said, because the last time we saw one of you guys, you destroyed us all. You came with the virus. Okay, so this is when the explanations start coming out about when we stop being able to communicate with nature. See, for nature, that was the oddest thing, because nobody knew how man got unhinged from being able to communicate and understand all the other entities that are actually around him and her. You see what I mean? Because when we walk into a jungle, all of the beings there would be literally brothers and sisters. So then as I'm walking through the place though, I'm realizing that everything there was on retreat. It was falling out. It was like what our world would look like if the dystopian idea actually took place. There were animals in with other animals that didn't even belong there, and they were causing problems. And this is what was being explained to me, that when basically since the lion or the tapir lost its home because they developed that area into a subdivision, it moved down here and ransacked the frogs area, ate a few of them, and now they've moved over. And this was literally the story. But what I also noticed is that, so I said, but wait a minute, how did you guys even get here? And I'm bringing this back to you guys in speech, because this is not the language it was communicating. It was all the same frame of what imagination is used to project images. That's how everyone communicates. So I sent the frame, how do you guys even get here anyway? And it said, look on the ground. And so I look on the ground, and there's these coconuts, but they're out of there's these coconuts and they're out of their pods. See, because what happens is, like, when a coconut falls off the tree, when it lands on the ground, it eventually can start coming out. The seed part can come out of the pod and then start growing itself into a coconut tree, right? So, but the crazy part when you looked at it is it looked like something off of Alien. You know what I mean? The movie where you see these pods open and whatever was in there is gone, right? So then it said, okay, so let me explain to you how this works so you understand how you work. Now, if I take one of these coconuts and I'm on Venus and I hurl it, I can get the coconut from Venus all the way to Earth, you're calling Earth. As long as it lands in the ocean, it will still be intact. That's how strong that shell is. That's how strong that seed is. So then this is what happened. So when Venus, who's actually where the bananas come from and where the coconuts come from, is really from that planet. When it wants to communicate, when it wants to scan Earth to see if it can host its life here, the flowers and all the phi-based pentagram stuff that we see in nature, what it does is it hurls a seed in first of its communication. Okay, this is called organic technology. Let's hurl in a coconut. When the coconut is hurled in, several of them, when they start developing the spores and then they spread out over the land, now the grid is up. This is the same thing we do with Wi-Fi. Now through that grid, the overmind, in this case Venus, can start to see through those organisms that belong to it. This is very simple, right? So I was like, man, this is crazy, because I started looking at the stuff around and I was like, man, it feels like a lot of this stuff comes from other places. And then it says, so do you. Now let me explain to you what you're doing. See, in the inception part of your consciousness, which is not conception, it's not birthing into a physical world, what you're constantly doing is trying to make a better seed of yourself. That's why we're always trying to better ourselves, because once we get the next update of ourselves, okay, this is it, this is as perfect as I'll be, on a subconscious level, we pack ourselves up into the seed form of that, and then we spray ourselves into the constellations. Okay, we spray ourselves into the womb that we feel like we may make it in. Now, the interesting part is it's the same way, and this is how you know it's true. It's the same way that the semen move. They are attempting to get to the egg, and the egg to them is like what looks like a sun. It's bright. And then whoever gets through first can incubate it, and then it makes more of them. And then now you're existing on another plane. Okay, so this is the same thing that we're doing here. What we're doing is we're spraying ourselves. Oh, excuse me, hold on real quick for me. Hold on. Okay, I see I'm hearing one of the ones that I sprayed onto the planet. It's like, what's going on there? I don't know if she's laughing or crying or what. But anyway, so this is a real thing. What I'm talking about is that so the goal is, and I'm just letting you understand what happens to how you can preserve the being that you call Ramon and the being that you call James, etc. Is that what we do is we encapsulate that consciousness into a seed. And then what we knew to do before, which we've lost sight of now, is we haven't really visualized what a strong womb is, because we're so used to dealing with these externalized. In this case, it's the externalized woman. The externalized woman is a cognate until she actually understands how to get beyond Sophia even. In her external form, she's a cognate of Semiramis. She's a cognate of Ashtaroth. She's a cognate of Ishtar. Okay, so what this means is that just like the king Yaldabaoth, the lion snake, has his external form as being the predator on land, the lion roaring to see in which it can devour, it has a wife. And its wife is, when you look at the darker mystical traditions that people are still worshiping, is the embodiment of the negative female entity, also known as Lilith. Lilith is Semiramis. Lilith is the Statue of Liberty. Okay, so this is the symbolism that they go under when they're practicing with this externalized woman goddess. And the reason why I had to point that out is because, see, when we visualize now where we should be spraying our seed so that way we can reincarnate into a higher sphere, we only look to earthly things, earthly portals in order to do that. We don't realize that each one of those holes in the sky are like glowing yonis. Okay, I'm trying to keep it G-rated here. Okay, those are glowing yonis. And so when you know which light spectrum you really want to go to, you can easily spray your consciousness into that. And this is what would be the real astral travel. And then now we just have to see if your calculations were right. And this is where the parable of the sower comes in. If your seed, if it ends up on, let's say, Pluto, and you can't live in a Plutonian atmosphere, you never take life. So that's how this works. And this is why you're getting so many different incarnations here on the earth, is because you got beings that are in the other percentage that you're not seeing. Remember I was saying you see 4% of the sky, right? So of course, when you get out into an area that's extremely dark, you see how many stars are in the sky, right? So if you've seen all of those stars all the time, every night, after a while, I mean, even right then, if you started seeing it when you were younger, you would have such a more broader scope of what you really wanted to do. But if you're only seeing Big Dipper, Mars, the same stars that makes, you know what I'm talking about. When you're living in most areas, you only see certain constellations. You see about 4%. So when you wander, you end up just going into the Big Dipper, into Pleiades, into Orion, etc. You don't see how many other places there are you can go. And remember, this is how you subconsciously begin to program as a hypersentient being also, because that's what obviously the controls of the reality have reached. This is how you program an individual never getting beyond a certain thought boundary. There is no other life on any other planets, honey. There's no other wombs out there is what they're saying. There's only one womb. There's only one God. There's only one sun. You see, so that's how this whole reality starts to encompass the individual, because they start to think that there's some kind of limitation in the limitless. So the last thing I have to say before, I take some more questions is that human beings are the limit to the limitless. They are the governor. And so the moment that we start to realize that and we take off the governor, and this is not only just coming out of the body, but this is also realizing in the consciousness that all of this stuff has uses. Forget coming out of the body. I'm about to recycle it, get it back together, and see what it can really do, seeing what it's really made out of. And then if I don't like that, once I do that, then I can get to the next thing with my imagination. So it's just about utilizing the tools and the resources that have been presented, especially if we're not facing hellfire and bunker busters from Israel right now. So we can't even focus on that. So this does still mean that we've done quite well at projecting ourselves into a reality that we can at least come to life. We've done that. I'm now animus. I'm actually inside the body. I'm with reason. I've been endowed with reason. Somehow I've bought my God mind here too. And then now all I need to do is fit the rest of me in here. And so that's how, once again, this hourglass becomes a great visualization, because remember, all of the granules begin to drip down into the bottom half of the hourglass. This is what I was saying by that eventually everything sees the light. So that means everything eventually gets completely filled with light. The more that you can actually start realizing that that's what's going on, you're trying to bring yourself from the place that you sprayed yourself last now completely into this space. But if you only get 4% of you here, then you're living this life as this character known as James. And this character James, he has a car, he has a job. Now, if you actually get 10% of you here, now you start to really, the lights start turning on, literally. And then the goal is, and I'm just explaining to people here what our real goal was, is to get yourself completely here, right? To be, and that's called being present, even though they don't understand what that fully means. But being present means now you're completely filled with it. And then when you're completely filled, now you've accomplished it. You've now made yourself basically God in earth. And then from that point, now you've accomplished the big thing, which is to basically become a conscious immortal. And then from there, see now, and because some people say, well, how is that going to look? Because they're always worried about everyone else. This is the whole problem. Everyone's worried about other people. How's that going to look to everyone? Any way you want. See, that's the whole thing. When you actually get into the higher frequency, you realize that, see, dense frequencies, the lower triangles, they don't actually understand how to control the programs and how the programs even work. So I only can give you one metaphor of how they work, and one is the pyramid, and the other one is Barack Obama. When the pyramid got here, and if you ask someone where did it come from, nobody can really tell you, but everyone had a story about how maybe it got here. Why? Because it was done by a master builder. Where does a master builder build? This is why they can never figure out the concept. This is why I know they never woke up. A master builder never builds on the physical plane. They build it on another plane first, and then it's tesseracted here. So in our sense, it just appears, but it doesn't just appear without a story to how it got here. And this is becoming the most difficult thing for me to actually explain. But if a person can get it, then they can start unfolding realities and seeing how things really work. So I'll explain it once again. There's nothing that's like poof. There's no such thing as poof. Nothing comes from nowhere in the physical realities. When something arises in the physical reality, someone had to put together the complex program and the frequency that it corresponds to, and then bring it into the reality. But that whole process is logged in a recording system. Some could call it the Akashic records. Really, it exists in the hive mind consciousness. That log is then inserted out of nowhere. And then when you ask yourself, where did that come from? And you check the log on a subconscious level, and then the log says, oh, it got here, and it starts giving you a bunch of integers that you can't interpret. So, but you at least get to the point of saying, okay, it must have been here before. Now, the next thing is the reason why I have to explain it in two scopes is because some people are like, man, what the hell are you talking about? So let me explain Barack Obama. Who is Akhenaten? Where did he come from? See, everyone still is stuck in not remembering that this person came from nowhere. But now they have a story. Oh, he came from Chicago. He originally went to school in Hawaii, and then he was a Congress member. Oh, no. That's not what happened. What happened is that he was tesseract into the reality. Then when that happens, because everyone's operating on programs, they get inserted the script of the program. Oh, he came from Chicago. He went to school in Hawaii. Oh, these pyramids were built 3,000, 4,000 years ago by this, they encode. See, so what I'm getting you to understand here is not to focus on the pyramids and not to focus on Obama, but to focus on how this all works with how things get inserted into the reality. No one really knows where they come from, but it just seems like they've always been here. And it's because when you're building on the other side of the reality and then you insert something into the reality, it just feels like to everyone else that it's always been there. So this is the explanation also of what really happens to everyone else when you get into the higher states of consciousness. It's whatever you want to happen. You just pop up, they're like, hey, what's going on? Oh, nothing, I'm just stopping by here today. Oh, really? So how was where do you work at again? Oh, yeah, I work. You see, it happens like that, really. And again, it's going to take people a little bit of time, maybe not long, because this is already released into your world. And here's another thing. When we talk about this stuff, what we do, because remember, we're human beings of the limit to the limitless. So once a human being starts to talk about something, that's when it starts to manifest. Because what we literally do is we build a tube to it. So the more that I start talking about it, the more I'm convinced of it. And this is how it starts to really work with power. The stronger you're convinced of it, the more faith you have in it, it can manifest. But now I'm going to tell you how that channel really works. Remember when I said that the imagination is the language of the higher pyramid, right? The higher cone. So when you're into this imagination and you start building this thing, now when you're a master builder, because you're on this other frequency, you can literally see all of what you're building, right? But guess what? When you're done building, you now have to compress it. No, you don't come out of your mother's womb as an adult. Why? You won't fit. So what you have to now do is once you actually get your whole projection together, you now also need to know the encryption code, the actual compressing code that allows it to go back into seed form, so that way you can fit it into this next stage of the physical consciousness. And I did get your message. We'll take a break here in a moment. So again, just to close the idea, now that you've projected it into this higher world, you've seen it all, now you pack it up, and then now you have to send it back into, if you wanted to manifest into third dimension, back in through the hole, so that way it manifests itself as a physical being or something physical. So there we have it. That is exactly the formula to how, in a step-by-step process, manifestation really takes place.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I saw that tesseract thing. I as you were explaining that, I saw an experience I had in my life getting my tarot cards. Mm-hmm. So I went down to this shop. This girl, the first time I ever went to this shop, this girl took me down there to get a set of cards. This is when I first started reading. And it was like 5 minutes to 5. We walk into it. I walk up to the counter, and I was immediately drawn to a specific deck. I was like, this is my deck. And then there was a box there, and this is my box. And as I was paying for this stuff, they were locking the doors. They were shutting at 5 o'clock. So interesting metaphysical shop. I wanted to look through the place. I was like, oh, well, I'll come back tomorrow. And the next morning, I went and picked Connie up, and we went back down there at about noon. And the place was completely boarded up, plywood on the windows. I was able to look through the front door, and all the shelves were empty. So I was like, oh man, and now this is early in my wake up process too. But it was like, wow, that place was there to get me my deck of cards.
Exactly.
I mean, it was a trip.
I mean, it's a trip, but it really, really works like that. I know you wanted to take a break, so I won't go into spilling into anything else, but it's just, again, it's amazing and frightening, and that's kind of how we like it. We kind of like it mixed up with the suspense.
Seven, if everybody's up to it, I'm good to keep going. I'll edit in the hour.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good. I mean, I'm just gonna.
Mon, are you good to go? Keep going.
Yeah.
I hear somebody dropping in and out. I'm not sure if that's one of the other guys there.
That's actually me dropping.
Oh, okay. That's I remember you had that. That rolling kind of thing on.
Anybody want to continue this on with a question? What do you got? Anybody got a Jake?
Yeah, I got a question.
Nice.
Hey, Seven.
What's up, man? Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm ready, man. I just came across your stuff late December, early January.
Okay.
And man, it's like I've been hearing you in my mind for years. So
we were one and the same for sure.
So I had this dream, and well, first of all, let me ask you about daylight savings time and the adjustment of our clocks. We just moved our clocks forward an hour, 2 or 3 weeks ago or so, and I was getting into a point where between 3 and 4 a.m. I'd wake up at 3 and I'd put myself back to sleep with the intent to lucid dream. Mm-hmm. I was getting to a point to where I was doing that 3, 4, 5 nights a week, at least on the work days, Monday through Friday. And as soon as we changed our clocks, everything has stopped now. And I'm not remembering my dreams or anything, but I mean, before we changed our clocks, I mean, I was, I wouldn't say fully lucid, but I was aware that I was dreaming, and I knew that I was in a different realm, and and I was able to control my environment at will, at ease. And I had memories of being here in the physical reality, but I also had memories of being there in that reality, and there were like overlapped memories, and I was completely aware and completely fine with it in there. I just kept about doing whatever I was doing in my dream state. But since then, I haven't been able to get back there. But also, on that same token, for about the whole month of February, I was saving my seed. I was listening to one of your shows, and I was, thought to myself, I'm gonna try this little experiment and see what happens. So I went. It was before we changed our clocks, and I went that whole month almost, and I was just getting really vivid dreams. And man, I mean, some of the stuff was just completely out there.
Right.
But yeah. Do you have any?
Yeah, you just need to re-angle the bed. What happens is that, and of course, this depends on how much energy is going through the body. But there is an actual, like I said, the calculating of the parallax. Like it's actually a way to slip out of the body. And in many cases, people actually will have their bed kind of configured in the proper way intuitively. Because when you go in the room, sometimes you know exactly where you want your bed, but sometimes the apartment kind of dictates, or the house dictates what way you should have your bed. So what happens generally, and it just depends on the person's node, but the sun is rising at a specific angle. And generally when daylight savings time and these kind of things take place, the sun has already moved into that other angle. And so what you'll find is when you get back around to the whole cycle again, that if the bed is still in the same position, then all of a sudden you'll have these abilities return. And this is simply, in many tenses, the way that you're pointed when you're actually around that 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and when the sun is actually rising up, if it can come down the line. Because, okay, so let me make this very simple. The sun is also running on a track, okay? And these tracks have a tendency to be seen as the ley lines, okay? And many of the stars also are moving on tracks. And so those tracks, if one of them happens to run right across where your head is positioning, it becomes rather easy for you to stay lucid, versus if that track is running vertical and cutting right across the body, it's very easy to not be lucid at all and to stay like almost dismembered until you completely come back into consciousness, like you don't really remember the dream or nothing that was going on at all. So this has, again, a lot to do with how the place is positioned. And the knowledge that I've been really looking into the most is how to draw the track into your quarters, like how to basically, like if it was a river, how to dig a little thing through the river so that way a part of your where you're at gets fed by that line, so that way you can go down that line and then jump on the highway, okay? And the only thing that I've seen that even came close to explaining how to do that was that you would take the hematite magnets, the ones that stick together and they're rather cheap, and you would run that magnetic cable. You have to figure out if it's north or south from underneath your bed out to where the other part of the ley line connected. Now, the only way that you can find where that ley line is to dowse for it. And obviously you can still get dowsing rods and things on Amazon, but it's basically finding that current and then channeling it into your room. And then that also becomes, because really where I'm breaching into this is not only advanced intelligence, but also regeneration. And this is allowing your body to basically get the fuel that it needs to not only make the astral travel, but also to regenerate itself, like I said, from the effects of gravity that take place daily. So I would try that. And, obviously maybe the wife would be like, no, we're not moving the bed, because, they're like, that doesn't look right. But you may be able to reposition yourself, switch sides of the bed too, because oftentimes we get on this one side and it even feels so comfortable for us to be there, and then the spouse is kind of forced to take the other side, whoever's the most dominant. So you may want to also switch sides. The other thing is that do not have as least amount of light as possible. Especially if you can cover your entire body, because it's also light sensitive, and then cover mainly the top of your head because it's the most light sensitive. That's where that main portal is. And then also, your forehead, etc. You don't want to be in there looking like the mummy, but then again, you want to actually see how little light that you can get and that you can be exposed to in order to more easily go into these other stages. There was one more pointer that I was going to give you. I have to think about it in just a minute. Obviously, there's simple ones like, making sure that you're not eating before bed. The other main one is I noticed that hydrogen, that was, of course, the mega hydrate, becomes quite a useful fuel, because the only thing that you're really attempting to do is get into a higher frequency and remain asleep. So the preliminaries that I did for myself, because I have a tendency to be dragged to the gates of hell sometimes in my dreams, because, this is always something going on in the dream world. So the way that I was able to start preventing what I'm called fear-based dream programs, okay? Because they're constantly, like, guys like me is like number one on the hit list. So it's always some kind of fear-based dream program attempting to insert itself, even if it's just for the night. So what I figured out is that if you live anywhere where there's something natural that you like running water, spring water, those kind of things, ocean or whatever, that to take a recorder out there and to get your own recording. Don't just depend on the one on Spotify or the one off the internet. Get your own recorder and record that environment. And especially, brother, if you can record the environment that is coming in at 4:30 to 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, like when that change is happening, and you record that segment, like get some ocean going on, some birds or something in that kind of environment, then that particular track becomes so useful for you to not only generate energy, but also stay out of the lower frequencies, because you're basically replaying 3:30 to 4 o'clock in the morning, but over and over again during the night. You see, so this is really hacking the whole scenario. You see, so those are the pointers that I have in regards to, getting back in there and, just being present. Like sometimes I just like to be present. I just let the dream roll out. Sometimes it's quite amusing how it gets cooked up. But what I don't like to be is under the water. And that's when I can't control the dream. I don't even really know it's a dream. And then I end up getting juiced in there because something's going on and I can't save somebody or who knows. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. At the beginning of this year, we started this year off with a sweat lodge just to set the pace for this year. Mm-hmm. And the first dream that I had that I became lucid, I just listened to one of your shows, and you were talking about shrinking yourself down to the size of an atom. Mm-hmm. And so I wake up in the dream, and there's this entity standing in front of me, and it looks it's got like the face of this like gnarly looking rabbit dog, right? And it's got this giant muscular green body, and it looks almost like that a rhino off the 1990s cartoons of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Uh-huh.
That crazy looking clothes and just this gnarly muscular body, and it's snarling at me, and I can tell that it wants me to be scared of it. And I was like, no, not this time, buddy. And I didn't really think about doing it. I just did it, and I shrunk myself down to the size of an atom, and I went right through him. And when I came out the other side, mm-hmm. I was at home, and my dog was with me, and I had put my dog down 6-7 months ago, but he was with me, and he was like my symbol that hey, you just made it. And then the dream went on, and there's an eagle, and there's bones, and there's a whole bunch of other shit in there too. Mm. But and since then, all the way up until daylight savings time, it was almost 3, 4, 5 times a week I was having these dreams, and I was becoming aware in the dreams, and I was building things, and there's UFOs and shit like that, and I'm flying in the sky, and I'm just completely aware of what's going on, and I'm just like, this is awesome. And now daylight savings time comes, and now I'm gonna do the
yeah, definitely readjust the parallax, because and people need to also see that when you have those kind of dreams, you also bring that into your reality, so you feel more expanded. It's like you come on, like, when's the last time, since most people have to ask themselves, when's the last time since you were a kid that you had this great dream that you actually woke up from and was like, man. Nowadays you have this dream, and see, because I know what's going on. So the fear-based dream programs, because remember, when you're younger, it's a lot easier to control your consciousness because it doesn't have as many thought boundaries loaded. But then as you become more involved in the reality, it's tangling. And we talked about that in the last show, about everyone wants a piece of you. The wife basically owns the phallus symbol. The job owns your legs, the other and a part of your mind. So it means that you can become so divided where other things can take a percentage of who you are. then it becomes very difficult for you to operate your vehicle. And what then happens is that when these fear-based dream programs start to creep in because of the lack of the control of the mind, they basically themselves are self-evolving, because you say to yourself, I don't want to have that kind of dream again. So they say, this is the kind of dreams that we're going to start giving them. And again, it's not necessarily that it's another, well, it is, it's another frequency, another energy that's diametrically opposed. There's always a diametric opposition to everything. When you say, well, I want to go up, and say, we want you to go down. And, you know, I want to love, but we want you to hate. This is how it works in the game.
Yeah,
so remember, go ahead.
It's just, keep it in mind, this is just a game, and it's your choice what kind of emotional reaction you want to have to somebody else or to something else, and that's where I'm really getting at this year. It's just like, everything is inside of us, and you need not go anywhere else for anything, because you already know.
Yeah. And then, we become very self-generating that way, like where we can power ourselves perpetually. But, another thing, though, is that, as the Joker, because, we all have that card, you're a 0 and a 1. So that means that you still can trump any cards, even the king, even the ace. So what happens with this whole thing, too, is that, I kick and scream and fight back. Like, I'm still, human beings are the limit and limitless. Nobody says that I even have to lose. Nobody says I have to lose the game. You see what I mean? Because that's also where I'm taking this, because when I get in the higher triangle, the last thing I feel like is coming back at times to one of these shows and start talking about the stuff. In fact, I got to the higher triangle because I had shut down all of that. But that doesn't mean that I'm just going to say, oh, I want to be in the higher triangle forever and I'm never coming back to Earth. No, I'm going to be in both. Because see, that was what was explained to me, is that how you can go further than where most have went, because you can see how this really works. If you're in the lower triangle and you're on the bottom, you're basically where the mass is. That's the black Saturnalian base pillar that holds up everything, right? So that's why also Saturnalian color comes from black to gray, like the Raiders, right? So when you start getting older, the hair turns gray. So then if you're hanging out down there, then forget it. There's no choices anyway. Everything feels like it's being forced on you by cause and effect. But as you start rising your way up through those channels, you gain more power, but also more responsibility. And then your final trial before you go through the hole is whether or not you're going to sit and become the king. You see what I mean? Because think about what happens. If you get into the higher areas of your lower chakra, you have power. You can feel it. It's very vivid. And it also is magnetic, so it attracts other people, and it's also sexual. And this is also why the stars in Hollywood, as I explained before, many of them have that part of their chakra activated. So they can stay on the top of that pyramid, be the Lord and the God and the star and all that to everyone else, but they're not going into the higher pyramid, because where are they going to start? There, on the bottom. Because when you get into the higher pyramid, and I'm just, again, using the pyramids as symbols. I'm not in the Illuminati, but when you go into this higher pyramid or higher cone, when you first come out, you don't know anything. It's like you don't even know where you're at. And you see all these weird shapes and these weird forms and all this stuff, and you're like, man, it's like you just been born again. You see what I mean? So for a being that has already graduated, let's say, for instance, Earth, and now they're on the top of the pyramid, sometimes in their consciousness, in many cases, the last thing they want to do is go and venture off into the higher world where they're just going to be like dumb again.
Right. So
you see how the trap can set itself up, but at the same time, it's so interesting, just like when we were younger, because that's when your person gets all their chakras and things moving in the wrong way. That's how they think. But if you're really still as you were as a child, when you reach the higher pyramid, now you feel that, oh my goodness, there's tons of stuff to even learn. This means that maybe things are not, they can be better. You see, because if you're already in the top of the pyramid in the world, you know how everything works. So you don't have this notion that everything is going to get better. That's not how it works. You see what I mean? And here's another thing. Remember, when you get to the top of the lower pyramid, you are 1% of 1%. So the 1% of the 1% being is worth the dweller coming personally to talk to. This is synonymous with Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. This is what happens. It moves right in on you. Oh, so, wow, it looks like you're one of a kind. In serious, it comes right in because see what you've done. If you reach that level, is you've been able to get into a frequency that's still it's serious. Not too many people can get into. So the dweller, because the dweller is disincarnate. Remember, it's an idea. It's an eidolon. It wants to incarnate itself in you. You can have it all. This is what there's the metaphor of the Jesus plagiarized story from an ancient culture. But the story was once you get onto the top of the lower pyramid, then the buddy up there moves in and says, "Well, shit, you're me and you, Dark Vader. I'm Dark Vader. You're Luke. I'm your father, and you're my son. You went through all of that to get to me. Now we're gonna reign." I'm telling you, it comes on just like that. Then, of course, there's the "get behind me, Satan," and this is because it is true. This is Sat. Sat is the dweller. Sat is also Brahm. Sat has so many names. You every time you turn around, it's Jupiter, it's Jehovah, it's Baphomet. It's all the same being. It's the Lord of words, or the Lord of the worlds, the Lords of the ring. The Lord of the ring. They're all synonymous with the same kind of attitude frequency. That becomes the last thing you need to pass. So then, of course, the person who's got their energies, got their chakras right, it's very easy to be like, okay, well, I told you to be quiet. You see, because remember, if you nothing's talking in your mind, there's nothing can come to you and say, well, you can have it all. Because even when it says you cancel. Because what I realized is all I was trying to do is see what's really going to happen if I can actually get the frequency higher and higher and higher and higher. And let me just start thinking after I get there, because I'm finding that thinking is preventing me from getting there. So this is the command that I gave. And this is when I started realizing that something else was inside of the body. Because I gave the command for everyone to shut up until we ascend the Jed. And then once we get out of the Jed, or we send up completely, then we'll turn on the thinking thing again. No, this thing didn't want to listen. It wanted to keep thinking. Are we going to die? I mean, I can't breathe. You're killing yourself. You may hurt yourself like this. You see, so you get all of that going on. But because, again, it was already flagged, I knew what I was dealing with. So this is very interesting. And then, like I said, now when you go through that tube and you come out the other side, a whole new world. Like it's really like that. Now because remember, it's a world nonetheless. That's why they show that the 8, the symbol of the 8 is 2 worlds, okay? 2 discs. So when you get into that one, though, everything that you don't like about this one doesn't exist there. That's the great part about it, right? All the strain and all that kind of stuff doesn't actually exist there. Then also, you're around 1% of the 1%ers, and you're no longer 1%. This is quite comforting because now you have people to talk to. So serious, listen to what I'm saying. When you get into that higher spectrum, you actually realize it's quite populated. Just like this one down here is quite populated, that one up there is quite populated too, but it's all the beings that humans just like me and you that have reached another state of their consciousness that can actually habit that plane. You see what I mean? So now you're learning again, but guess what? You're learning the real dynamics to how this works. Now you're actually back in the control seat, as above, so below. So now you know what you're doing there that's affecting you here. So you're actually seeing the causes to the effects rather than being on the receiving end all the time. So this is the incentive to begin to move up into that space.
Nice that it's not a one-way trip.
Nope, not at all. You got you got 2 bodies. And the other thing is, remember, there's a lot of fear attached to even doing this because you do get into these weird zones. It's hyper weird. That's the only thing. That's the only way I can explain it. It's so new. Yeah. We've been away from doing it for so long. It's quite disorientating at first. But here's the thing that I noticed was very reassuring. One thing first, on the other side of all of this, it's all family, and everyone's aware that they're family, so you don't have nothing to worry about just getting there. The second thing is, if there's anything that's real here and the truth here, don't worry about leaving it behind because it's going to be where you're going, because that's where real really exists and truth really is. Right? It's because there's always this, well, you're my family. Well, what about my son? What about my daughter? I don't know if I can actually come out of the body. Because remember, some are almost out of the body and then they get the jolt. And then everything that's designed in the reality just wants to stuff you back in. So just like a crab for a moment, it's not your shell, but you then took this shell, and then every time you try to come out, something happens and you go back in real quick. That's the easiest way to explain it, just like how crabs are on the beach if you walk up on them. So you have to be relaxed. And the only way that you can relax is if you know that you're going to somewhere that is better than this one and there's no harm there. And it just so happens when you realize who you really are, nothing can harm you. And that's what the whole part of the quirk was, how you make yourself infinitesimally small in order to fly through bebop or rock steady if it decides to manifest itself because it's embedded itself as an eidolon in your program because Warner decided that he wanted to create Disneyland in the real estate in your mind. You see what I mean? So,
Yep.
you know, and I feel juiced about the whole thing, man. Like even talking about it, it gets me going anyway. Obviously, I enjoy the experience a bit more, but it also to deliver this. And that's why I said, you know, you can be the biggest difference here. You'll be the anomaly. Because when you know how to work the upper triangle and then to come back to the lower triangle, Mashiach. This is the Christ. Like you came back. See, some people can't even believe it. Like when you got to keep mind blowing them with all the stuff that you've seen that they can't actually say is not real because they find the as below connections. Then after a while, they start to realize that you really went. But the most disbelieving thing they can't handle is why did you come back? Because if somebody thinks if you make it out of here, you just better go for, but what kind of person would you be? You know what I mean? It's like, so long, sucker. It's just like I got out of Earth. I'm leaving mom, I'm leaving dad. So that's not the whole thing either. It's about transcending this. And then like I believe the scripture says, man, I bring this thing down and I pick it back up anytime. This means that I can come down to your world. I can walk through your hell. I can hang out with the cripples, the lames, and the lepers. And then I can raise this thing all the way back up, see the cymatic fields and the nests just swooning and spinning upon each other in infinitesim. Then I can glance out into what seems like an endless space to realize that there is really no beginning and no end, and even start to comprehend what that really even means, all the while getting a little oatmeal for breakfast. You see what I mean? And to me, see, what I realize also, and here's another thing that you got to understand what's really going on in this reality. It just needs a new update. Because see, what the stars and the actors really are symbolic of is that whoever can keep up the most cause and effect, they're always going to be chosen as the ones to be leading the reality. Here's why. Even a Madonna has sent several ideas into millions of girls' minds that has changed and shaped the decisions that they've made in the future, right? So let's do a simple calculation. How many zeros and ones can somebody like Madonna spit out of another person's consciousness? Let's not say if it's good or bad. Let's just say the idea, first, I want to be a star. No, I don't. She's a whore. Well, I maybe want to be a whore too. Maybe I should go and get some of these kind of clothes. I like that red lipstick. I can't believe she's doing that. Is that the kind of car she likes? Now, how many zeros and ones did this program just spit out? So I think that people need to when they want to understand the game, they have to realize the game gets the players that are going to cause the most zeros and ones to spit out, because the zeros and the ones are the energy. And since everything is energy, the overarch doesn't really care what the drama is in between causing these causes and effects. It just wants to see those causes and effects happening. Why? Remember what I told you earlier. It's a self-evolving super mind. So the more cause and effects it can get, it can see, I don't really like gasoline. I prefer diesel. Maybe I shouldn't have moved out to LA. This place is horrible and everyone treats me like shit. I need to move back to Idaho and maybe start planting things. Maybe I need to go green. This whole Madonna thing has led me for the last 10 years and I can't believe I'm so obsessed with this person. You see, so you get this whole dynamic because the person is now basically built their world on these thought forms. And that's why they need the Lil Wayne, they need the Madonna, they need the Obama, they need the Putin, they need any kind of character that's going to allow the spinning out of the zeros and the ones and the multiple decisions that people are going to make, because they live in those people's dream. When we turn off the dream, right? We unplug ourselves from that, and then we plug into ourselves to realize what we can do. Then, and I'm telling you, 100%, we're something else. I haven't even gotten to the bottom or the top of what we can do. I just know it's parallel with the X-Men stuff. I'm doing it right now in this reality. Nobody has killed me. I've had some really strange experiences, even with other people that seem to come from nowhere. So I know, meaning that they just come into my life. Nothing really dictated them to actually be coming in my life. It was just by chance that I met them. And then all of a sudden I end up learning something from them, either whether they are positive or negative, and then they move on. So this lets me know also there's others that know, like they say in the Matrix, they know you know. It's because you give off an energy signature. When you start rising up that pyramid, you also start moving slots. Because what happens is when you're coming up, whatever you're coming up into, you're pushing that position out of place. So either that needs to come down or also go up. So everything is aware. It's like an NFL team. Once a new star player is drafted, everyone's aware that that player is there. And on top of that, they know that there's a potential that they may lose their position if they can't somehow outperform. So this is how energetics work. So what I really encourage the people that are listening to this message to do is build your mind, body, and soul off of real principles and factual things, and keep expanding. Don't pay attention. Don't always incorporate everyone else into your equations, because your equations will be off. Save your imagination, because your imagination is the real language that you speak, and it's the only one that works in the higher triangle. Also remember, if you lose your creativity, then you can even be in the higher triangle and not even know what do I do? The higher triangle is saying, well, master, anything you want to do. Oh, because you're used to hanging out in a world that everything they tell you what you do. That's how the sun works. It sprays down the program. So it's telling you, oh, you're this, you're going to be this, you need to go to this job. So it's telling you what to do. In the higher triangle, you tell it what to do. So this is a little bit different from how we're normally operating, but of course where we want to be.
Right. That's great.
Oh, Seven, this is Greg.
What's up, Greg?
Well, I just want to tell you how honored I am just to be sitting here and listening to you and all the podcasts that I have been listening to in this past year. I'm a baby, like you were saying. I'm blown away right now. At the end of last year is when I started listening to your podcast, and I came across some great friends, and my awakening is just rapid pace. And you are a big part of it, and everything you have to say hits home somewhere. And I just want to say thank you and keep going.
Man, you're more than welcome, man. I'm obviously honored, man, to always be on the phone with people who've ingested the message at any point, and then also can actually dig through what I'm saying, because at a certain point words become, it's laughable how you can attempt to cram an elephant down a straw, because that's really what would happen when you're starting to explain it. But at the same time, if you have some trust, and that's what I started seeing, why many of these centralized mythical characters really needed the trust factor with the people that they were talking to, because if you're going to go there, it's like reading a map. If you get a map and it's off of the internet, generally you trust that that map is accurate. So if you get to where you're going, you look at the map and it's pretty much accurate. So if we have trust in each other, and that trust has been gained maybe over a prolonged experience of seeing that that person is telling the truth, then they also become very useful for mapping out the terrain. And I just wanted to, be real straight up with you guys. Like, all I'm doing here, man, is that, man, I didn't know it was like this. And just hear what I'm saying in my voice. Like, I expected to be proven wrong a long time ago. Like, I went on the tangent of discovering what was in spirituality because I was in a situation. I had got myself in a situation where I needed some type of godlike power to intervene, or else it was curtains for me. The only thing is I just didn't give up on myself. I said I didn't actually even believe in God, really. I saw other things that other people had going on, especially in the church. Somebody jumping around screaming. Doesn't even seem like that's really Sister Betty anymore. So obviously something's going on, but I can't necessarily say that's God either. But so that was as much experience as I really had in it, beside my childhood of course, being raised in a lot of dogmatic traditions. But I was like the atheist in a sense in there. I always needed that real experience with with the thing, but I was also not really willing to dedicate myself to the level of now what I'm seeing you have to be dedicated to really discover, the hidden, right? So then all of a sudden, when I got into a position where I had to really dedicate some time to figure it out, bam, just like all the rest of us. Because if you think about it, I've never talked to one person that said, man, I was trying to find the knowledge and man, I couldn't find it. I've never seen anybody like that. Anyone that I talked to that they said, man, when I started asking myself the question, all of a sudden just stuff started dropping out of nowhere. I got this book, I got that book. It's because that's the help. I call it the fingerprints of God. Because there's other things when you're a reverse engineer like me, because that's the only way that I can find out the truth of some things is I got to reverse engineer it. So when you reverse engineer situations and you realize, like, let's say, for instance, if you're in this house and then stuff starts happening to you in that house and you figure out it's because it's the way the house is configured. But you didn't know that when you moved in. So who knew about that this house was going to be configured properly for you to get to the next stage of your expansion? Who was that? And can that being be interfaced with? Because it sounds like it's a little bit ahead of things than you are. And so what I realized is that it was me. And I know that the end of this, if you can call it the end, is when I meet myself here. You see what I mean? Like, because that's how it happens. When you're going around the ring, they set you off in different sequences. That's how pyramids work. So you never are supposed to catch up to yourself. Everyone's running at a specific frequency and you're never overlapping. But if somebody, the anomaly, starts running the circuit completely until the point where it laps itself, that would be what it would be like. You catch up to the first version of yourself, okay? Then you close the ring. And when you close the ring, you become the Lord of the ring, because the ring is a blueprint. It's a circle. It's the pentagram. It becomes a blueprint or a map to the internal and external worlds. And once you have that and understand how that works, you now have full control over what is no longer, as we were saying earlier, the UFO. Now, oh man, the glass is half full, because just like what they said, they thought that they were almost had explored everything. And then they realized that they were less than 1% of the full exploration of what's really here. And this is why we're sitting on this little rock, right? We don't even know what it is anymore. And we're gliding around, but there's other ones, you see? But to enter into those spaces, like I said, not everyone is dumb. That's what we have to come to the conclusion of. Not everyone's running their planets and their worlds in this whole maniacal way, right? Somebody had to take on the magnetic energy instead of the oil and the electricity, start really exploring the brain and the mind, the body, and the soul, more so than some iPhone 9. You see what I mean? And then started applying what we already have even here. Because here's the thing, like, look, we're sitting on a powder keg. There's so many elements, and this is the last thing I want to explain in this conversation, because it'll also help you in understanding what you're doing. Now, remember what I said about so what wood is. We'll just take wood as an element. The mineral is the same thing, but all the elements are condensations of light. Okay, so the sun sprays out this light, the tree takes it in, and then it sucks in that light, and then eventually that light becomes wood. It builds its body off of the light, okay? But because that light is now being stored and contained, because that's what we are, we're containers for light on multiple levels. So because it's being contained, it's also being held below the speed of light, and this is what's making it dense. So when we take that same bark, okay, and then we run it through, a lot of it most of the time, a distillation process. This is how, let's say, cocaine comes from poppy, nicotine comes from tobacco, THC comes from weed, DMT comes from acacia. You see, so there's a distillation that creates another substance that actually becomes what many people not only get addicted to in certain tenses, but also takes them to another world. Why? Because they're eating the light. So that's why I understand now that, see, in the Masonic book, A Bridge to the Light, they show you in the book, and I don't recommend people buy the book because you don't even want to keep that kind of stuff around. But for people like me, I know how to keep stuff like that contained. So when I look at the book, what the book shows is that in each initiation of each degree, there's a tree. And the reason why it's like that is because those trees are the databases for the knowledge of what it takes to be able to hold that degree. And this is why that degree, and I'm not saying this is how modern masonry functions, because they're at this point almost devoid of the light. Nobody is holding the higher degrees anymore because people can't obtain that higher degree. So what happens is that how the original system works is that the amount of light that you can contain also creates what's called a Therian or a master Therian. This is basically you're holding all this data, but this data is also energetic. So if you have a lot of it in you, or you get too much, you go to the crazy house. There's actually a way that you can get too much of this stuff, right? And we know some people that are like that. It's like they're just going nuts on the Facebook page, and you're like, man, are you even seeing what you're writing? And this is because maybe they went up the back door, used a certain substance, was ready to get off. It wouldn't let them off. And then they ended up staying in there too long until the neuron burns. And then when the neuron burns, there's a severing or a hole inside the chakra, a tear or a tear. And this is why even to cry is a hole in your chakra. And the energy that's coming in there is producing the water, because the water is the byproduct of the soul. That's why it gives us energy. The hydrogen is the same energy that you find contained within the first stages of the prana. So anyway, to not make this very complex, just to understand that there's dynamics to this. And then once we understand those dynamics, and then that comes forward to our races of people, everyone in the prism, that's when we're going to have a prison break. And once we have the prison break, which is what this 100 monkey is all about, once the prison break takes place, then the prison shatters. This is like basically everyone realizes that it's a total realization. Now, I can only explain to you what this is going to be like. Because this energy, this whatever it is that we carry in our body, is contagious. So if one of us activates and another person is around, as I've talked about on other shows, they get activated. And then if they're around somebody, so if this happens in a football stadium, what I'm telling you, we're all going to heaven, or we're going to see at least what it looks like. And this is what I know why there's a lot of still optimism here, and why you can't really find many of the preliminary races and tons of bodies to show us that there were other whole life forms here. And it's because there is a process that we can actually take the entire planet. And I think this is what the last Mimsy was trying to hint to, that you can take the whole planet into a full-on ascension. We all fly through the sun, literally, and then we come out on the other side, meet family, charge up completely, and then go on about our merry way with all the people that we love up there. There's no marriage. That's why I say there's no marriage in heaven, because no one can claim another person and say that that person belongs to them. We all belong to each other. That's a fully perpetual orgasmic field. You see what I mean? Nobody's hating. And then that is the kind of vehicle that you're going to need. And remember what I'm saying. See, if we tried to take everyone to space now with all of their partialities, and I'm talking about inner space, they would have a fight on the ship. Somebody would get let out the airlock once we get 1 parsec away from Earth, because they would come bringing that, excuse my language, that shit. It's like, well, I'm supposed to be sitting in the leather seats. You know, it's like, wait a minute, you didn't develop your 5th chakra, so how do you have the right to be at station 9? You see, so that model doesn't work. There has to be some kind of unifying component that takes place before we can actually get into what life is really about. And this is what I believe. Until we figure that out, this is where we hang out. Yep. It's like, until you understand how to play with everyone else, you hang out in this class where everyone is basically diametrically opposed to each other, trying to get ahead, trying to be the smartest, trying to all the triangles, basically. And then when you move into that next space, you know what it is.
Will somebody in here please find the light switch?
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, serious though. I mean, you're spot on it, because it's like, also, you know what I mean? Like, why would I want to waste my time? You know what I mean? This is what I'm starting to ask myself sometimes every time it's time to go in, because remember, going in, and this is something else that you guys got to know, it's not addictive.
Right.
Drugs are addictive. Going into the higher state of consciousness is not addictive because, see, remember I was telling you about the dweller. Now, he's the original crab in the bucket. So what happens is that it's not really trying to let you go. And that's why I'm saying it's a mother-father principle, but in that tense, that's the female side. She smothers her young. Smothering. It's mothering with an S. Don't want you to go nowhere. Oh, baby, don't leave the house. Oh, it's wild out there. Like, you'll never survive. Just stay here with mama. So this is what you really deal with in the reality is it's not really promoting you, even in your consciousness. It's not promoting you to really get out of the body and start experiencing these weird spaces. So even when you experience one time, and this is what you start noticing with substances that can do that, you don't actually feel like going back in a couple minutes or the next day. So until you train yourself, because remember, when I went on this documentary, I went in something about 19, 20 times. One of the guys, he was kind of checking out within the first few days just because the experiences were so strong. And I'm not saying I wasn't having strong experiences, but I also had a lot of diligence to fulfill what I had came in there for, which was to see if I can have a third eye on for a long time, what would I really find out? And if I could handle it, because remember, there's an energetic principle to it. So you feel all this energy going through the body, and you know, it's a wild thing. So it's basically about riding this minotaur and to the point where you can get to your destination without falling off and breaking your back. I mean, that's literally how aggressive it is at a certain point. But then once you learn to ride, then, like I said, you're entering into these spaces and bringing back what I'm telling people here today, that, again, the sun is not a sphere, it's a hole. On the other side, I mean, it's a full receptacle. That's the other thing. The sun is not running out of energy. So unlike an hourglass, how you see all the granules eventually drain into the bottom of the hourglass and then you got to flip it over. See, what's happening is that that's not how it works. So that's why the people were misconceived about this pole shift. A pole shift would be when you flip the hourglass. The reason why that doesn't happen is because the top part of the hourglass never runs out of granules. This is just like the male body is designed, especially when it remains perpetual, it'll always produce seeds. You see what I mean? Like the male body pretty much always produces seeds, right? So it's on top. So we're now looking at spiritual, the spiritual polarity. So in this case, it's easier to call it positive rather than male, because then that gives the wrong connotation. So the positive force doesn't run out of energy. It's receiving energy from all the memories and things that we're doing with this energy, and it's taking that back in and then spraying and refining it and spraying it back out. It's never running out of it. So
the toroid.
Exactly. I mean, it's a self-propelling system, propelling itself based on our experiences. So I think that even in that alone, if we can become more entertained, because people need to kind of read into some of this stuff and just find practical uses for this. This means that if we can become more entertained about the characters that we're experiencing in this reality, known as the game, then it actually allows us to be able to recycle in ourselves the energy that would normally be burnt on the exhaustion of gossiping about others, hating other people, and disrespecting other people. You see what I mean? It's not even necessary. And this is why I was saying also that the idle mind is really the devil's workshop, because when you're not doing anything and you're not really working on your consciousness, it leaves plenty of time to go and judge other people and say, oh, he didn't do this right, or, this is not the way. So all that's going on in the whisperers, that's the other name for being the dweller, the whisperer, the narrator. All of that is all narrator land. So when you're sitting down, you're ripe for an attack unless you're building something, inventing something, working on yourself, overhauling yourself. And then when you stay busy doing that, you're not trying to say, man, don't you think John is just a little stupid at this point? I mean, we already told him about how it is going to be the higher world. He's still over there fucking smoking cigarettes. That's not a part of your field. You see what I mean? Like, the best thing that you can do from John is continuously show him what a great presence that he really is, because he's still contributing to your ultimate experience. You see what I mean? And then if you don't like that, you just choose to move away from John. If you don't send out the judgment, you can't be judged. And this is how it also works. So the moment that we can move out of the ping pong game, the ball doesn't come back. And then we save ourselves actually always having to play the game of who's good and who's not. So So this is it. This is about being the priest on the dimension, not really burning up much energy, saving it and storing it for when you're really going to need it, which is, what we've seen in the sexual side of this and the mental side of this, the spiritual side of this. All this stuff operates on the same scope. And then once we get it, how it works, now, in which we are, like right now, nobody's having these kind of conversations. Like, I know I can listen to all the conversations. Now, my droids can do that. Like, I don't even have to use spiritual power. I have droids that scour the entire web, which is billions of websites at this point, for any time a keyword is mentioned that is on a list of keywords that actually, if anyone ever says those keywords, I know they know. You see what I mean? Because that's easy to do. But most people use that for trying to figure out what's going to be the next keyword of trending so they can make some money. So this is the last thing that also I want to bring up, that remember, the money is false power. And this is what they say about March. March is going to be somewhat of a test for many people for them to really see where their power is. And if they pass this test, this means that despite what happening in March, they're going to actually put the power in its proper place so they can use it. So for a lot of people, March was a test on their finances, because it's really the whole scope of things saying, let's see if you think money is really the power. And then the more that they crumble under whatever kind of news they got about whatever the money started messing up, then that shows, okay, I'm highlighting to you what you think your power is. But if you are back into yourself and you're like, look, I don't even care what's going on, especially with the financial thing. It's not like I'm a dummy, and it's not like I can't make it. It's not like I'm not a beautiful, brilliant individual. If I decide to turn my light for one moment on making sure that I succeed, I'm more than sure I'll do that. So as long as I can keep the dweller out of my mind, which is the one telling you, you can't make it, you're not going to succeed, oh my goodness, this is dangerous, what are you going to do? So as long as you got that completely out of the mind, and then remember, we're with you. All of us that are on that frequency that start blocking out those lower vibes and really start honing into that one specific frequency of remaining basically in the state of progression, you join. And that's how I got here. You see what I mean? Like, all my information is obviously coming in through a certain source. It's going into you. You bear witness to it because it's also what you experience. You're on that same frequency. It upgrades certain things, and then you pass it on to someone else who's doing the same thing. So what are we? We're a band. And that's what I realized. That's harmony. We become harmonic with each other based on our frequency. But here's what we're doing next. This is the last perspective of, because we're always in action. This is not a legend that we need to talk about and repeat over again. The next move is we get one of us on every level. And when I say one, we're just saying someone specifically on that frequency, like elementals. You have elements that are on fire, on water, and they're specifically on those levels. So when we have someone spread across the prism, and then we join hands, and that's why I never count the Rick Rosses out. When we join hands, that all of that field, he's got that. All he needs is someone to grab his hand. You see what I mean? And bridge him. Why that person that bridges him is going to need to have that other hand of that other spectrum to bridge that, to ground that. You see what I mean? So that's how it works. So I can visualize it now. And then also I've gotten into the back room of things, and I'm candid about talking about it, because even if something does happen to me, people know where I was at, and then they can pick up from where I left off. It's not like I care, because once the whole thing cracks, I'm going to reanimate myself again. I know how this all works. Like, the bones will rise from the grave when we get to what's really supposed to be going on here. And then on top of that, remember, there's more of us on the other side than there are here. Because there's more people that have died than are actually in the existence right now. So this means that majority of what we really are is really not even present on the planet right now. And this is the purpose of, in certain sense, keeping those bridges connected, because it's like an ancestral thing. It's just you're doing it in real time. You're linking with people that are really ancestrally a part of your lineage, as it smeared itself from black all the way down the line to white. You see what I mean? So when you when you smear yourself or send yourself into a prison, there's a black version of you, there's a yellow version of you, a brown one, there's every single color on the spectrum, and then there's what you're calling prime. So then when we put all those together, which is what Dynamo Jack's telling you on the video, he says it right there if we're listening to him. They said, well, how did you got this power? Like, this man sits there and sets something on fire right there with his hand. It's like one of the only videos you can pull off the internet where someone's really got some superpowers, and he's definitely not trying to lie to you. You can see it in his face. So he sits there and he sets the thing on fire. And so when the guy asked him, how are you doing this? And he said, any person can do this, but the meditation every day, and let me explain to you, meditation isn't just sitting there and stilling your mind. That's one form of meditation, but it really, you can be walking around at your job, washing dishes or whatever, and still be meditating, because what did he say? I'm forcing the energies together. All you have to do is understand where the center of your body is, which is like right there in the navel and slightly above the navel. When you bring the energies from below and the ones from above and you force them into that point, this means you're forcing them, like Samuel Word was talking about, into the marriage. You're basically telling the two forces that don't really get along with each other, oh, we're going to make you marry each other now. Now we're going to really kick off the game going on inside of myself. I'm going to marry my masculine and feminine side together and get them back to working together so I can create my dynamo. And then I can use the energy from my dynamo of these two opposing poles on this generator that stopped running to thrust me across the cosmos to other space that I got to get to. Because last time I checked, Centurion 9 was a great place to hang out. You get where I'm coming from. It's like, this is not all to the experience. This ain't the last time you're gonna be hearing from Ramon and Tom and Greg and Seven and James and all the rest of these characters. Not if I have my way with it. And guess what? I have my way with it.
There we go.
Because the only thing that you really can control is yourself, within the same steam that all is self. So that's what I was saying. Once we link into these higher minds and these higher ideas, we start communicating on a whole nother level. So, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's 2 hours and 30 minutes. I know, everyone's like, okay, well, let me digest some of what was brought forth before.
Right.
And also we've went through a pretty decent chunk of everything that I had on the list that I had to really get out there, because there's some of this stuff that's a little bit new. And so people are going to have to digest it and listen to it a little bit and say, okay, that fits in with this.
Yeah. Well, I know I'll have to listen to it a couple times myself, I'm sure.
Man, for sure. I mean, but I'm glad that we got a chance
there,
to have the transmission for sure, because it did come through.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We felt it. Wow. So, well, hey, Seven, man, keep on tripping on.
Yeah, no doubt, man.
Yeah. I've actually got some stuff to make a brew here myself that I've been contemplating on doing here for about the last 6 months.
Yeah, man, like I said, man, why not?
Yeah.
They'd rather have
Probably longer than that, Tom.
What's that, Ramon?
Because we spoke about it when I was in the States.
Was it? Well, yeah, I guess it was. It's quite a while ago, wasn't it?
Yeah. I want to say one last thing before we get going, Seven. The other thing I've noticed too, besides switching the room around and stuff like that, is taking naps even on your bed, taking naps in weird positions, like sleeping diagonally or sleeping your head towards where you normally put your feet, or taking a nap on the floor or on the couch, or that it's easier to become lucid or out of body in those kind of places.
Yeah.
So I understand completely when you mean, like, if you sleep always in the same position in the same section, it gets kind of dull.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you gotta, especially you gotta move it around a bit and get the body, because even when you turn on one side of the body, you're actually shifting all the weight on top of your organs, and it's a lot more difficult to get out of the body on that side of the body. I think that's the left side of the body. When you lay on your back, it's the easiest to get out, but also the toughest to control. So, so it's really interesting, because it's actually, it's that technical sometimes, where it's the position even of, like, if your feet flop down to the side And you can get to certain, everything is like a weird, you may move your hand one way, you get into one planet. You move your neck another way, it's like that. But if your legs, your feet are cocked down to the side, your coccyx is actually not open. So you can't get to a certain space anyway. So what I used to do, especially when I first started practicing with the breathing, is I would tie just like the cover, like I would tuck the cover underneath the outsides of my feet, so that way they just point directly up. So I would just cuff the cover underneath so that they're pointing directly up. And that way your coccyx is actually able to breathe. And then that actually gets you into certain spaces, some of the spaces that would be more primed to get into. I do have something that I wanted to read before we close out. It was something that I wrote to a person, but I found it quite useful because I was really attempting to get them to understand how things work, even though they said they only understood about 2% of what I wrote. But it's just a short paragraph, and this paragraph says, "So the act of spiritual and material creation is simple, then for the adept. Unless you wish to create something beyond the thought boundary. If you coalesce the idea into a seed, that's fire, then spray it into the womb that can bring life. Spray it into a womb that can bring life to it, that's water. If it works, then your words have not come back void. This is a visualization, speaking from the frontal lobe." So I'm talking about how to manifest from the frontal lobe, which is the forehead. Then I said, the physical maximum of this in the external world is to create children, but some have the tendency to be looking in the wrong direction. Organic technology is everything endowed with reason in the physical. Our children can be configured to do whatever they wish. Such is also the plight of the mother and her son. When do you draw the boundaries? This is also why the aura is contained in the orb itself and constantly attempts to push the boundaries via energetics, causing an opposing diametric force. This is, of course, the chariot of the God of this world. The more we push, the stronger the reverberation comes back. Self-evolving operating systems are quite proficient in mapping the void. That's what I mean by thought boundaries, to go beyond the idea of input and output and access the overmind, to intone a massive upgrade to a system long overdue is indeed the mission. The matter at hand is truly to stand at the door, not crossing over into either side, thus canceling the diametrically opposed integers, and then entering the space that is beyond that to access what is beyond prima materia. Surely it exists. It is already conceived, waiting for its parent. The University will then be graduated. So people can take that, write it down, look at it again. It contains the keys to how to manifest things into 3D. And why it may be difficult, especially for people who've reached spaces where they think they should be manifesting, that to actually, to do it, because you got to bring it back in. And so remember, what we see in that is that there is a purpose to this world, because it brings things that will otherwise just be mist, a puff of cloud, into an actual density, into an actual body, so that it can experience itself in a different way. So in a sense, we can call it a game, but don't lose.
Right.
Yeah, you brought certain things for me together, and the one thing with the going back to the dream and how we're always like want to move the bed and stuff like that, and then with what you're talking about, how important it is for us to study water and its behaviors, because I feel that whole so below, so above kind of saying that. That's the way energy also flows. Except the difference with water, I can see it. I can feel it.
Yeah, man.
It's easier for me to study, but
man,
go ahead.
You hit it right on the head there, man, because that's how I was traveling. Like I actually went through the water particles. And I think this is why they keep saying, oh, we're looking for water. And it's because wherever you find water, as an astral traveler, you can always go to the places that have water, because we're so entwined with water, it becomes our bridge that we climb through. It's like, because we're like 70% water, something about the soul is heavily related to water, something about it is related to hydrogen. So whatever we have going on as the full comprising of who we are, we're able to travel down water channels. And because the water is in so many places, it's even on other planets, we can use it as a bridge to get into different spaces. And so it's interesting how you mentioned that, because I had been utilizing hydrogen and able to use this bridge quite easily. It was quite expanding. So it's just to chime into the truth to that, because the water is an element that is so connected to us, and then it has so much power as far as its use. It's definitely an energetic property. And so I always used to say, when you think that you're alone, remember the water. Remember the air and this kind of stuff, because it's definitely something. So you're not necessarily alone.
Yeah, if I could take a bit further there, I know we're closing off, and now it's getting even more interesting.
As always.
The- There's an exercise that I practice, and it's just using my imagination. I sit down and not really concentrating on breathing or any mudras or anything like that. Just sit down, close my eyes, and picture being back in the beginning of Earth, right in the beginning of the first, what some people might call the single cell or the supercell, different names. In the mystic, a lot of people call it a supercell because it's the very first life here, and it's the one that started producing the oxygen, and how it's living in the water, breaking breaking that down and releasing the oxygen, and recycling the carbon dioxide that's being released by all the volcanic and fire and stuff like that. And in that water, it's just like supposedly through, which I haven't been able to accomplish, but through that supercell is when you go into the no time zone. So the way it was explained to me, some people, you'll feel like you'll be there for days, and then you come back, it's only been 5 minutes, kind of thing. And the reason why I mentioned the water, because that's where it lives, and in my when I'm there, it's kind of like, it's not a vision, it's not fully imagination, it's like almost another layer of reality comes over this reality. Like, I'm aware of my body, I know I'm sitting down here, I know everything, but then another layer is there. Do you know what I mean? Or
Yeah, I mean, I know exactly what you mean. That it is literally another layer. Like, and you actually can even feel it move. And this is when you actually can feel it sometimes jolt.
I could
But
I could feel myself hit the water and go under the water, kind of thing, almost. But I could still feel myself on the bed.
Yeah.
So it kind of really, excuse the word, really kind of fucks your mind sometimes.
Yeah, it's like the inner space thing. And serious, like, it's like literally is a time, there was and it's not even like a time travel. It's like, I don't know, it's omniscience, I think. It's like, the real definition of omniscience. You have the ability to go right into a space right from where you are, rather than like how space travel is perceived, where you need to actually go to another destination. And I think that this is actually the key to teleportation, but the actual key module to it is the imagination. Because if there's no imagination, then there's no projection. And even in the projections, like anytime a person is trying to project something like that's supposed to happen or try to get an idea of it, they have to use their imagination. So there's no harm, no foul here from how everything operates. It's just, can we take it beyond the standard thought boundary of where most people think is even possible, and start sending those seeds of consciousness that are actually even animate at that point into other spaces, and then fully bringing them to life. And I think that that's what we were talking about during the show today, and so it's a good place to end at, is that, when you can coalesce yourself into another vehicle and then shoot yourself into another space and then reanimate yourself all in that moment, you actually experience the creation right then. Like I said, even the spirit of God's hovering over the waters. I'm sure that it was, and I'm sure it decided to dive in. I mean, that's, how it really works. And I can see us now, as I think that, I forget which movie it was, but this particular craft had a really sleek seed kind of aerodynamics. And then, that was the thing that was used to propel through space. And then it would just enter into another planetary system, plunge into the waters of the ocean, and then, get ready to disembark and go on land. And I think that that's how everything got here and how we even get here ourselves. And also, the good news is it's probably how we get to other spaces. And then just because we think it takes, 16 years, 15 years, whatever, 10 years to come into some type of full consciousness, that's just on this dimension. For all we know, when we can get into a whole nother space, get all the way through it, living into an adult in that space, all in just one night here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's also why when you have a problem or you want to create something, taking a warm bath and sitting in water is always the best. Like
It's
every
always been the best
scientist.
for me. I heard also that that's like if you're a water person, because that's exactly how I work. Like when I get in the shower, like, man, I've been looking for a waterproof pen and paper or some kind of
Yeah, for
waterproof
real, right?
device. Because I'm like, look, and then I'm always like, I'm going to remember. And I even come out of the shower, I'm all wet and everything, trying to type on the computer, damn near about to blow the thing because the water's going all down in the keyboard. But it's just because when you get into the water and the bath, the shower works also very useful for it. Then all of a sudden, for people who have that kind of kinetic thing with the water, then the ideas start coming along. And I believe that's 100% because that it's a very useful conductor for us to be able to bridge into the fields of where the ideas actually are also coalescing. And so, yeah, I mean, it's interesting, man, because when you really think about it, it really connects because that's also really the mother principle. And, I had some picture up here. I think it was like the old Mother Mary because I was looking at how they done this thing. It's just so idiotic to me, but I guess it goes in the game. But I'm looking at this goddess, Yemaya, all right? And you can tell that this goddess originally existed
Yemaya,
within the European pantheism, right? And then they turned around and now it's got the straight hair and now it's like the Starbucks sign, right? But it's just got like a skin and a color change, but not that really matters. But the interesting part is, I noticed, is that all the cultures still, the oldest ones, give you more of an idea of what you're actually dealing with than this washed over version that they got up in the Sistine Chapel that you look at and you can't find any resemblance of what it's actually trying to tell you. It's even got Western clothes on. So that's the other thing. You can tell which one is new and which one's old because there's an argument about always, well, no, that we had that in the culture. Wait, but why is it wearing slacks from the 1500s rather than no clothes over here with a fish body? So I'm looking at this and this is interesting as a closure. When I look at the totem for this Yemaya, it's the fish goddess, right? It says this, the goddess of the water and life. They got the pineapples there, the crescent moon, the fish body is sunk in water with some stars around, and then the thing going up the middle part that looks like Condundalini. Now, if that doesn't explain the entire action of one heavy part of our energetic principle, I don't know what it does. And then not to mention, Europe is named after Europa. So there's obviously a connection there. Paris, Venus, Europa is also Venus. So you see, to me, I feel like instead of, like, I don't got to go plunge all the way into it. I'm definitely not going to be bowing down and worshiping it. But for me, I still need to understand, fully understand, what was already known. So that way I'm not, you see me spending 10, 15 years trying to do the homework on something that's already been done. You see what I mean? And this is what I'm starting to learn about these traditions more than anything, especially if you can go back far enough, is a lot of the stuff that we would need to end up knowing anyway. Once you get out of the body, then you're like, well, where do I go? You're like, well, shit, did anyone have a map? But like, yeah, I think on the wall over there in those hieroglyphs, that may be a map now that I look at it. So I think it's like that the earth is really like a cloak and dagger treasure hunt, that there's all sorts of stuff laying around, animate and inanimate alike, that contains the clues. And I would like to see us as men and women that's what I figured was going to happen on this Diamond Tree documentary. And it didn't actually end up that way, but it was still the intention is for a group of people to get together for once, to go on the exploration of the other world and then come back and damn report. I mean, it's like, why do we got to send NASA to do that? It's like every time they come back. Did you see anything? No. Like, I don't even know when is it gonna be over? You see what I mean? Every time they come back, they're like, oh yeah, no, we think we discovered a new planet. Now they said that like 15 years ago, another planet just like Earth. It's like, we're never gonna get anything out of these people. We know, of course, me and you know that, we all know that, but that's not where the populace is. But we can push people into understanding that, look, they're not gonna bring the highest level of things to you. Forget about it, because that would put you over them in a certain sense, especially since you haven't inherited the negative side of when you're being crafty with knowledge and information. So we have to go and get it ourselves. So let's get the best of us, because I'm not going to say it's for everyone. It ain't going to be for the 80-year-old grandma. Okay, so we can sum it up right there that it's not for everyone, but we probably can bring something back for her. And that's what where I'm at with this. I'm realizing that, look, we need our most agile. I'm not saying our most strongest. I'm not saying our most intelligent, because at each point, all that gets tested. Like, it's going to test one moment if you're courageous, the next minute if you can even love, the next minute, it's going to test all of that. So we just need the most agile utility folks. And then that's what we need to take into these expenditures into consciousness, and then come back with viable data, information, and application that the rest of our species, which is brothers and sisters still, can utilize for us to come back into that fold. So that way we can charge ourselves back up, because we're at 8 billionth of our power. Like, I'm not clueless to that. When you add all the humans together, that's how strong we are. But one of us by ourselves is at 8 billionth. And then even that person, if they've reached 10, 15%, it's because they actually are soaking up someone that may be not even at 1% or 2% and not even conscious that they're here. Just, blah, 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 blah. You see what I mean? Like, this is what I feel like is happening with the earth. So it's just wild, again, because to pull this one off, baby, and this is all I have to say and I'm done, to pull this one off, there's got to be some space credits. No, serious. I mean, like, to pull this one off, because there's just so many dynamics to this thing. If you pull this one off, they're not gonna let you fall into the abyss. They're gonna hurl you on the shoulders of the gods, even, and be like, he. You know what I mean? But serious. I mean, use the imagination. Get yourself back into this, and just remember, it may be everybody else's story, but it doesn't have to be yours when you're writing your story. And so I think that's where we're at. We spend more time doing that instead of worrying about these fools that don't even know how to interpret the symbol of the Illuminatis and all this kind of stuff. It's just burning off time. And I get it. And it also gives energy to them. It really does. It lets their little dream world still remain animate. And so now, as inventors, as explorers, as creators, and we have this, most of us, that's still the masses, are ready to experience that. We still have a lot of our youth in us. Let's get to it. And so the last thing I want to say is that, and I said that before, but we're opening up the site. April 22nd, Secret Energy opens. It's the largest spiritual platform on the internet. I mean, the hosting alone is costing $600 a month. So that kind of give you an idea of how much of a massive database it is of knowledge application, and it's a social network. Quite a feat to pull off. Even at the last moment, it was looking a little shaky, but we're going full steam ahead. And the only thing that I'm building in that platform is to make it so that when you ask the question, you get the answer. So there's no time lag in between you figuring out you got the wrong answer, trying to figure out, these two opposite answers and which one's really true. Also, if you're looking for the radio stations, obviously 100 Monkey Radio is actually on there. People can go right to the stations that have been rated to produce the best information about consciousness to date. So this also gives other stations a bar to hit to, if they're still talking about the Zeta Reticuli, like the old news from 10 years ago, basically they ain't got the update, that they can actually start listening to radio shows like 100 Monkey and 7 on there right now, talking about some stuff that people knew not. And then that way we can start to agree on something, really do the open source spirituality, where when someone specifically that knows about something, or a group of people that specifically know about something, get to work on it, bring me back the complete identity of this being. By the end of the week, we have all the data expunged from every single source to pour over to figure out what the truth of it is. That's it. You see, and that's what I'm saying. I think it's all strange because I just was like, let's create it. And then it took me 8 months and the people that I was with, but now we're at that point. But I think that this is something that we should have had in consciousness a while ago. Like it's our own Facebook. You see what I mean? Like all of our stuff is there. All of our videos are there. So, you know, this is where I believe is going to make the big moves. And that's how I also keep the whisperer off me, because it's forever like trying to get a conversation in. I just stay busy, stay working on this. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm off in some other weird frequency somewhere, just hanging out, acting like a baby. So
I'm excited for that startup.
Man, me too.
That's going to be cool. It's going to be cool.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Well, damn, James. Thanks so much for joining us, bud.
Man, I'm glad we got a chance to do the show. I know you
appreciate
had emailed me about 2 weeks ago, and I was like, man, I may never be able to do a show again, man. There's so many things going on. But then I was like, man, I got to get on this circuit, because you can't just all of a sudden open the doors on the website. You got to say something. And then plus I was holding this one. This was a show that I did get a chance to talk to Randy Moggins yesterday, so I tried to bring it out, but it was still, it was a little premature. You know, I got to get around family sometime. Not saying Randy's not family, but I have a tendency to be so comfortable on the show that I'd be like, okay, I'm talking to my friends here. Let me give my friends this information. So I don't even think about the listeners and how they're hearing it and just some of the stuff that I may go through to make sure I tailor the message better. I'll just be more like, all right, these are my brothers, my friends. They're on the same quest than I am. If I can get it to them now, they may be able to blow this whole thing tomorrow. And you know, they'd be laughing at me from the other side of the dream, talking about, are you awake? I always joke about that eventually you'll get to a certain point where you get out of the body, and then anyone that hasn't got out of the body, you can just go over to them and be like, yo, you need to get out of the body. Yeah, let's go. It's like, are you out? That's the joke where it's like, are you out? You need to get out. So, all right.
All right, man. Hey, much love to you, brother.
Man, likewise.
And, we'll talk again, right?
Okay, for sure.
Thank you, Seven.
All right, Greg.
Yeah.
And
Before we close out, last thing I want to say is, I guess that's why it's so important for them to try to kill the imagination, and how I see them in the school system killing the imagination.
And what I saw that was the jewel that's been taken, that you never notice is gone.
Right.
Like it's a silent thing. There's two silent things. One is to steal the imagination, and then the second one is to divide the people that you even knew as your best friends. And then for one thing to happen, like you've done thousands of things with your best friends. You've learned so many things together, and then one thing happens, and then all of a sudden all of that is like it never even occurred. That's the new part of the program, and that keeps family members separated and close friends separated. So then when you really need help, there's nobody to call. That's how they would want it to be. And so those are also where we're rebuilding those structures, because really the secret energy is going to be a family, and we're going to be close. And it's not a charity either. So the moment that it really kicks off with the inventions and how we operate, it's also going to be a place to where our people, when they need help, we build the things that are going to help them. And that's the vision, and it's intact. And remember, it's not just one of these earthly visions like, God, this would be great for everyone. I'll go and pull that right from Nebular 9 and tesseract that thing through one of these wombs here, and then make it animate, and then nurse it all the way till it comes into life. And I believe that when we start doing that with whatever we want to achieve, if we realize that whole process, how we are male, female, we're responsible for conceiving it and birthing it, right? And when we realize that, and then also remember, for the people who have significant others of the opposite sex, you are more in a primary condition because you got both of the apparatuses there. So when you understand how it really works, the male can conceive the idea, and then on an orgasmic level, send that into the woman, and then she can finish incubating it and then bring it out through her projection. And then all this goes on in a plane that can't be seen by the physical eye, but definitely is real.
Right.
There it is.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
I think
all right, that's a good one to end it on.
Okay.
Finally. Really, honestly.
Yeah, really, we're done. This is the last thing.
The very last. The last one. All right, man.
Okay.
Hey, much love. And for all you guys out there listening, thank you.
Okay, where's the thing that y'all say in the end, though? Because that's really the end.
It's on its way.
Okay.
Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance.
The love you deny is the pain you carry.
Namaste, my friend.
Wait, one more thing. No. Go home.
All right.